Smoke turned the sky the color of old bruises. I stood in the middle of the village gate with blood running down my side and a hunting knife that felt far too light for what was coming. The gates were splintering. Torches threw wild shadows across the dirt. And beyond the broken timber, I could see them, dozens of bandits pouring through the gap like water through a cracked dam. Behind me, my wives were battered and barely standing. Mei Lan pressed a blood-soaked bundle of herbs against my ribs. Qiao Yue had her bow drawn, the string trembling from her arms. Su Ruyan stood between them, holding a packet of spice powder in one hand and a ledger in the other, because apparently even in the middle of a massacre, she refused to lose track of inventory. The gate gave way. Scar stepped through first, his iron saber catching the firelight. That's a fun story, right? Real dramatic. Good opening image. Here's the thing, though. That was 3 months from now. 3 months before any of that. I was just a guy with a leaking roof, 3 furious wives, and absolutely nothing to eat. Let me back up. I woke up on a dirt floor with rain hitting my face. That was my first clue something had gone wrong. My second clue was the roof, or the suggestion of a roof, since a significant portion of it had decided to stop participating in the concept of shelter. Thatch hung in wet clumps. Timber that might have been sturdy a decade ago now looked like it was held together by mildew and reluctance. Wind came through the walls the way it comes through a sieve. I was lying on a mat that smelled like it had been used to transport fish. My body ached in places I didn't remember injuring. My hands were calloused in ways that didn't match anything I recognized. And 3 women were standing over me, staring down with expressions that suggested I had personally offended each of them on a spiritual level. The one in the faded green dress spoke first. Mei Lan. Thin, tired, with dirt on her cheek, and the kind of quiet fury that comes from being hungry long enough that anger is the only fuel you have left. Are you going to lie there all day? Or do you plan to feed us? I opened my mouth. The one with wild hair and amber eyes cut me off. Qiao Yue. She had a hunting knife on her hip and the posture of someone who considered violence a reasonable opening argument. He doesn't plan anything, she said. That's the problem. The third one, Su Ruyan, neat hair, a worn maroon dress, a wooden abacus tucked under her arm like she might need to calculate our misery at any moment, didn't raise her voice. She just looked at me the way an accountant looks at a bankrupt client. You owe 12 silver to the village headman. Our food stores are empty. The roof is broken. And you slept until noon. She paused. Again, 12 silver. I didn't know what a silver bought in this world, but the number alone sounded like a problem. So did this world. Because here's what I figured out. Lying on that fish-smelling mat with rain on my face, I wasn't where I was supposed to be. The memories were blurry, like someone had taken 2 photographs and overlaid them badly. One set belonged to a modern guy with a modern life. The other belonged to a disgraced villager named Lin Chen, who had managed to accumulate debt, shame, and 3 arranged marriages in roughly equal measure. The village called him useless. His wives called him worse. And from what I could piece together from the jumble of memories, they weren't wrong. The original Lin Chen had been a disaster. Lazy, dishonest, the kind of man who borrows money he can't repay and then hides when the lender comes knocking. Now I was him. Wonderful. I sat up. My body protested. Everything about this body was lean in the way that means underfed, not in shape. I was wearing a patched hemp robe that had been washed so many times it was more patched than robe. Mei Lan was still watching me. Qiao Yue had her arms crossed. Su Ruyan was already doing something with the abacus, probably calculating exactly how many hours until we starved. So I said, food. 3 pairs of eyes locked onto me with the intensity of people who had heard promises before and watched every single one evaporate. What exactly are you going to do about it? Qiao Yue asked. I didn't have an answer yet, but I had something they didn't know about. Right at that moment, as if it had been waiting for a dramatic cue, a translucent window appeared in front of my face. Nobody else reacted. The 3 women kept glaring at me, completely unaware that I was now staring through a floating blue rectangle that hadn't existed a second ago.
Mountain Hunter System activated. Welcome, host. Basic tracking abilities unlocked. New function available, Companion Potential Appraisal. You have 1 unread notification.
I blinked. The text stayed. I looked past it at my wives. They were still glaring. Su Ruyan's abacus clicked. The rain kept coming through the roof. I looked back at the notification. You have one unread notification. That's what it said. Like a phone. Except I was fairly sure phones didn't exist here, and neither did anything else I recognized from before. I tried to focus on it. Nothing happened. I tried thinking open at it. Nothing. The notification just sat there, unread, like a message from someone you know is going to ask you for money. I filed it away. Whatever it was, it could wait. My wives could not. I'll figure it out, I said, standing up. My legs felt like they belonged to someone who hadn't eaten properly in days. Which, based on the original Lin Chen's habits, was probably accurate. I grabbed the rusted hunting knife from the corner of the hut. It was the only tool available. The blade had seen better centuries. Qiao Yue raised an eyebrow. You're going to hunt with that? It's a knife. It's garbage. Garbage can still cut things. She didn't look convinced. Neither did I, frankly. But I was the husband, the failure, and the current owner of a body that needed to start proving itself. So I took my garbage knife and walked out the door. Azure Mountain Village was exactly what you'd expect from a place that had given up on ambition. 30 or 40 mud brick houses along a single dirt path, surrounded by terraced fields that looked tired. A wooden palisade around the perimeter that suggested someone had once worried about defense and then lost interest. I walked toward the village square because that was where people gathered, and I needed to understand the layout. Also, I was hungry, and sometimes knowing where people congregate means knowing where food is. What I found instead was an audience. Joe, who got there first. Stocky, strong, rough-spun tunic. The kind of guy who measures his worth by making sure everyone around him feels smaller. Look who's awake, he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. The great Lin Chen, provider of nothing, keeper of 3 wives he can't feed. A few villagers laughed. Not many. Most just watched with the tired indifference of people who had seen this performance before. I kept walking. Joe, who stepped in front of me. Where are you going with that? You planning to hunt something? Last time you went to the mountains, you came back crying because a squirrel scared you. That was apparently a real memory. The original Lin Chen had been frightened by a squirrel. I tried not to let that detail undermine my dignity, which was already operating at a deficit. I'm going hunting, I said. With that knife? It's what I have. Then you're an idiot. Probably, I said. But I'm still going. He laughed again. The villagers exchanged glances. The consensus was clear. I would fail, I would come back empty-handed, and nothing would change. I couldn't even argue with the prediction. I just knew it couldn't stay like this. I walked past Joe Hu, past the square, past the wooden palisade, and into the foothills. The Azure Mountain foothills were dense with pine and fog. Rocky ground, thick underbrush, the kind of terrain that punishes carelessness. Morning mist curled between the trees like the place was trying to decide whether to be atmospheric or genuinely threatening. I focused on the tracking ability the system had given me, and the forest opened up like a book. Subtle cues I wouldn't have noticed on my own resolved into clear markers. Broken twigs at a specific height. Mud displaced in a particular pattern. The system translated forest sign language into something I could read.
Tracks detected. Wild boar. Approximately 230 pounds. Direction, northeast. Age, recent, less than 1 hour.
230 pounds. The squirrel guy was about to fight something that weighed more than he did. Wonderful. I followed the tracks for maybe 20 minutes. The system guided me, broken branches, hoof prints in soft earth, the smell of disturbed soil. And then I found it. The boar was massive. Dark bristles, small angry eyes, and tusks that looked like they could open me up the way a butcher opens a side of pork. I crouched behind a boulder and assessed. The system had flagged a terrain feature nearby, a narrow ravine with loose rock on one side. A natural trap. If I could spook the boar toward it, the unstable slope would do the heavy lifting. So that was the plan. Scare a 230-pound animal into running toward a specific location, hope the terrain cooperated, and try not to die. I was really setting a high bar for myself. I moved around the boulder, found a heavy stone, and threw it at the boar's flank. The boar screamed. Not a sound I'd expected. It was the sound of pure, compressed rage. It charged. Not toward the ravine. Toward me. I dove sideways. The tusks missed my thigh by maybe 2 inches. I hit the ground, rolled, and felt the world narrow to teeth and muscle and the smell of wet earth. The boar pivoted, faster than something that heavy should be. It came again. I scrambled up the slope, toward the loose rock. The system was screaming about terrain instability. I was screaming internally about everything else. The boar followed. Its hooves hit the loose scree. The ground shifted. I threw myself behind a tree trunk as the entire slope gave way. Rock and earth cascaded down. The boar went with it, tumbled, and hit the bottom of the ravine hard. The biggest rock caught it across the neck. Silence. I stayed behind the tree for a good 10 seconds, breathing hard, before I looked. The boar wasn't moving. I had killed something. Through a combination of desperation, a system prompt, and the kind of luck that makes you want to apologize to every god simultaneously. I dragged it back toward the village. It took forever. 230 pounds of dead weight across rocky terrain. My arms burned. My back screamed. My hands blistered on the rope I'd fashioned from vine. But I had meat. About halfway back, I saw something. Mei Lan was crouched by the path, examining a plant. Not picking it. Not walking past it. She was studying it the way a jeweler studies a stone, with focused intensity. She pulled one leaf, rubbed it between her fingers, smelled it, then pressed her fingers into the soil beside it. She frowned, moved 2 steps left, pressed her fingers into the soil again. Her frown softened. I didn't say anything. She didn't notice me, but I filed it away, because that wasn't the behavior of someone who didn't know what she was doing. I dragged the boar through the gate of our compound and let it drop. The thud echoed. Mei Lan looked up from where she'd returned to sorting seeds. Qiao Yue appeared in the doorway of the hut, amber eyes going wide. Su Ruyan's abacus stopped mid-click. For a long moment, nobody spoke. "We have food," I said. Qiao Yue walked over, knelt, and examined the boar. Her hands moved over the hide with professional assessment. "You killed this. Terrain did most of the work." She looked at me. Really looked, for the first time. Something shifted in her expression. Not trust. Not warmth. Just a tiny recalibration. Humph. Mei Lan had already started preparing to butcher it, her knife movements precise and efficient. Su Ruyan was calculating portions with the intensity of someone dividing assets in a divorce settlement. Nobody said thank you. Nobody smiled. But when they handed me a portion of roasted meat that night, it was the largest piece. That was something. I sat against the wall of the rotting hut, chewing boar meat that tasted like the best thing I'd ever eaten, and the system pulsed in the corner of my vision.
One unread notification.
I still couldn't open it, but it was there, waiting, and something told me that when I finally could, nothing about this life was going to stay the same. I woke up to the sound of someone sorting seeds, which, honestly, was better than waking up to the sound of rain coming through the roof. Again, the morning light came through the gaps in the thatch in thin golden strips. One of them fell across Mei Lan, who sat cross-legged near the cold fire pit with a woven tray balanced on her knees. On it was a small pile of seeds, or what I'd assumed were seeds. Most of them looked like small, sad pebbles that had given up on life. She picked them up one at a time, turned them between her fingers, held some close to her face, set them into one of 3 smaller piles, then moved to the next. She did this with the focus of a jeweler sorting diamonds. Except the diamonds were shriveled bean things, and the workshop was a dirt floor in a shack that should technically be condemned by any reasonable building standard. I watched her for a while. She didn't notice. Or she was ignoring me, which was equally likely given the current household temperature. At first, I thought Mei Lan was just quiet. Slow, maybe. The kind of person who stood in fields staring at dirt because there wasn't much else going on upstairs. I was wrong about that. The way she handled those seeds wasn't random. Each one got a specific test. A squeeze between the thumb, a tilt against the light, a rub along the surface. She was checking which ones were still alive, which ones could still grow. She was doing viability analysis on a pile of seeds most people would have thrown at a bird. I'd seen people do this before. Not in person, in documentaries. Back when I had a phone and a couch and a life that didn't involve being married to 3 strangers in a mountain farming village. Agricultural scientists did this kind of thing in labs. Mei Lan was doing it on the floor of a hut. Her hands moved with a certainty that didn't match the frail girl holding them. Gentle, yes, but deliberate. Every motion had a reason. Every reason came from somewhere. I just didn't know where yet. I got up, stretched my back in a way that made sounds no early 20s body should make, and stepped outside. The morning air bit. Fog still clung to the foothills, thick and pale. I needed to understand this household. More importantly, I needed to understand these women. Not because I was curious, though I was, but because the system had flagged something about them, and that unread notification was still pulsing in the corner of my eye like a mosquito I couldn't swat. Later that morning, I got my first real clue about Mei Lan. Uncle Tian was sitting by the communal well, looking exactly as old as the mountain behind him. He nodded when I approached, which was more acknowledgement than most villagers gave me. I asked about Mei Lan. Casually, the way you ask about the weather. He squinted at me for a long moment, then talked the way old men do, slowly, with detours. Her mother had been a farmer. Not the regular kind. The unusual kind. The kind who talked about soil the way other people talked about children. Who experimented with methods the village had never seen. Crop pairings, layered planting, soil treatments using ash and minerals. Methods that sounded like madness to people who'd been turning the same dirt the same way for 20 generations. The village mocked her for it. Then the famine came. The crops failed. Everything failed. The village starved. And Mei Lan's mother, the woman who'd spent years trying to grow things differently, died with the rest of them. Not because her methods were wrong, because there hadn't been time to prove they were right. Mei Lan had watched her mother die, teaching her things nobody believed in. And now she was sitting on a dirt floor, testing seeds using those same methods, in a village that still whispered about the crazy dead farmer's daughter. I stood there for a moment. Then I walked back to the hut. She was still sorting seeds. I looked at her, really looked at her, and the system responded. The interface flickered. The unread notification I'd been staring at for a day finally became accessible, and the targeting reticle settled over Mei Lan's crouched form.
Companion potential appraisal, active. Analyzing. Companion potential detected, S rank, spiritual agriculture.
The words hung there. S rank, spiritual agriculture. I had no frame of reference for what S rank meant in practical terms. The system didn't hand out explanation manuals, but I knew what the word spiritual implied in a world like this. It wasn't just farming. It was something beyond farming. Something the village couldn't have understood even if they'd tried. Mei Lan's mother hadn't been crazy. She'd been early, and her daughter had inherited whatever instinct she'd carried, refined, sharpened, and quietly waiting for someone to notice. I noticed. I sat down across from her. She glanced up, eyes guarded, hands still moving over the seeds. So I said, "What do you need?" She blinked. "For what?" "To grow something. On that plot outside. The soil's terrible. I know that. You know that. The weeds know that. So what do you need to fix it?" She stared at me like I'd just asked her to explain the stars. Nobody had asked her that before. Not what she could do. What she needed. She looked down at the seeds. Then back at me. Her voice was quiet, tentative, like she expected me to laugh. "Ash," she said. "From hardwood. And decayed leaves. The dark ones from the north slope, not the pine. Pine makes the soil acidic." She paused, then added, almost defensively, "It won't work overnight. But in the right combination, the soil can change. Given time." I nodded. "How much ash?" She told me. It was a lot. I spent the rest of the day hauling it. The burned-out remnants of a charcoal maker's site near the south edge of the village gave me the hardwood ash. The north slope, a 40-minute walk uphill, had the decayed leaf litter she'd described. Dark, crumbling, rich with the smell of earth that had been recycling itself for years. I filled 2 baskets, then a third. I carried them one at a time because I didn't own a cart, a wheelbarrow, or frankly the upper body strength of anyone who'd been doing this for more than a week. By mid-afternoon, my shoulders felt like someone had beaten them with a stick. My back had filed a formal complaint. My legs were considering resignation. But I kept going. Because here's the thing. The system had given me a word. Spiritual agriculture. That word meant something. And if Mei Lan could do even a fraction of what that label implied, then every basket of ash I hauled was an investment. A very sweaty, very painful investment. Zhou, who showed up around the time I was dumping the third load. He stood at the edge of Mei Lan's small plot, watching her spread ash over the cracked, grayish dirt with the careful precision of someone painting a portrait. He looked at the ash. He looked at the dirt. He looked at her. Then he laughed. "You're putting ash on dead dirt," he said, with the confidence of a man who had never successfully grown anything in his life. "What? You think fire makes things grow?" A couple of villagers nearby snickered. Zhou puffed up like a rooster who'd just discovered an audience. Mei Lan's hand stopped. She didn't look up, but her shoulders tightened, and I could see the way her jaw set. The look of someone who'd heard this before, who'd heard it her whole life. I dropped the basket. Zhou. He turned. His smile flickered when he saw my face. Not fear, not yet, but the mild discomfort of a man who'd been hoping to mock someone without consequence. What? She knows more about the earth than anyone in this village. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Including you. Including your father. Including every person standing here laughing at something they don't understand. Silence. Zhou's jaw worked. He glanced at the other villagers, who were now very interested in the sky, the well, and a chicken that had wandered past. This dirt is useless, he muttered. Then it won't matter if she wastes her time on it, will it? He didn't have an answer for that. He left. The others drifted away after him, the way people do when the entertainment ends. Mei Lan still hadn't looked up, but her hands had started moving again. I picked up the empty basket and headed back up the north slope for another load. I didn't expect thanks. I didn't get any. But when I came back with the fourth basket, there was a cup of water sitting on the stump next to her plot. Still warm. Nobody said anything. I drank it. It tasted like the best water I'd ever had. I didn't see Qiao Yue for the first 2 days after the boar. This wasn't unusual, apparently. She came and went like a stray cat. Gone for hours, sometimes overnight, and nobody asked questions because nobody wanted answers. Mei Lan had mentioned it offhand. She hunts. She comes back when she comes back. Which was a lovely system, if you enjoyed living with someone whose schedule was governed by what appeared to be pure spite. On the third morning, I made a mistake. A small one. The kind that seems reasonable right up until someone pins you to a wall. I'd been checking the hut for anything useful, tools, rope, materials I could actually work with. The place was a museum of disappointment. Broken clay pots, a mat with holes in it, a fishing line with no hook. But in the corner, leaning against the wall, I found a recurved bow. It was beautiful, worn smooth by years of use, the wood dark with oil, the string replaced recently enough to still look tight. Beside it sat a quiver of arrows, fleshed with care, and a hunting knife in a leather sheath. I picked up the bow, not to use it, just to look at it, which is, of course, the exact moment the door opened. I want to be clear about what happened next, because I want you to understand that I did not see it coming. 1 second I was holding a bow. The next second I was against the wall, and someone's forearm was across my throat. Qiao Yue stood in front of me. She was covered in mud. Dried blood caked one side of her face. Her wild black hair looked like it had lost a fight with every branch in the forest. Her amber eyes were the color of something that might kill you and forget about it by dinner. "Touch my gear again," she said, "and I'll break your fingers." She wasn't breathing hard. She wasn't yelling. She said it the way someone says, "Pass the salt," flat, calm, and completely certain. I considered several responses. Most of them involved apologizing, because her arm was very much on my throat, and she was very much not kidding. "I was looking," I said. "Not taking. Looking is touching. Touching is losing fingers." "Got it," I managed. "No looking. No touching. Fingers stay." She held me there for another 2 seconds. I think she was deciding whether I was worth the effort. Then she let go, stepped back, and picked up the bow like she was reclaiming a stolen child. She checked the string, checked the limbs, ran her fingers along the wood with a tenderness that, under different circumstances, I might have found touching. Right then, I mostly found it terrifying. I rubbed my throat. "You always come home in a good mood? Or is today special?" She looked at me like I'd asked a fish why it couldn't climb a tree. "This is a good mood," she said. "Wonderful." She set the bow down carefully and started pulling items from her belt. A skinned rabbit, a pouch of something that smelled terrible, and a strip of leather she'd used to bandage a cut on her forearm. The cut was still bleeding, but she ignored it the way you ignore a paper clip. I sat on the floor, keeping a respectful distance, and watched her work. There was something about the way she moved. Efficient. Every motion had a purpose. She cleaned the knife before she cleaned the wound. She checked the arrows before she checked herself. The gear came first. I'd seen people like this before. Not in a village. In a different life, in a different world, I'd worked with people who treated their equipment like an extension of their body. You took care of the tool because the tool kept you alive. Everything else was secondary. Qiao Yue moved like someone who'd learned that lesson before she learned to read. "Your arm's still bleeding," I said. I know. You could clean it. I know where my arm is. I decided to stop offering medical advice. Instead, I asked about the mountains. That got her attention, not in a good way. Her jaw tightened. Her hands went still on the bowstring she'd been inspecting. For a moment, I thought she might actually pin me to the wall again. My father hunted those mountains, she said. Best tracker this village ever had. When I was 12, he went past the Black Ridge. She paused. He didn't come back. The Black Ridge. I'd seen it from a distance, a dark, jagged line of stone marking the far boundary of the foothills. No birdsong reached it. No vegetation grew on its upper slopes. It looked like the earth had opened its mouth and forgotten to close it. They found his traps, Qiao Yue continued. Past the ridge. Deep in the mountains. Marks he'd left on the trees, weeks after he disappeared. But no body. No sign of a fight. Just traps, still set, like he was coming back to check them. Her voice didn't crack. It didn't waver. She told it like a fact, the way you'd say the sky is blue or fire is hot. But the stillness in her hands told a different story. He told me never to go past the ridge, she said. So I don't. I hunt everything on this side, and I know every rock, every stream, every animal trail from here to the tree line. She looked at me directly. That's my ground. My gear stays on my ground. My rules stay on my ground. And nobody touches my bow. I held up both hands. Understood. She studied me for a moment. Then she went back to her knife. I sat with it for a while. The information, the weight of it. Her father had vanished into a place that killed sound and swallowed people whole. She'd been 12, and in the years since, she'd carved out every inch of safe ground on this side of the ridge, learning it so completely that nothing could surprise her. She wasn't just a hunter. She was a 12-year-old girl who decided she would never be caught off guard again. Qiao Yue. She didn't look up. I'm not going to restrict where you hunt, I said. I'm not going to touch your gear. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. Now she looked up. Suspicious. The way a cat looks at you when you offer it food it hasn't earned. Then what are you going to do? Ask you to teach me. She blinked. Tracking, I said. I can follow prints. Badly. You can read a forest like a book. I need to know what you know. Not to replace you, to help. She stared at me for a long time. I could almost see the gears turning. Nobody in this village had asked her to teach them anything. They'd called her father's methods reckless. They'd called her wild. They'd called her a lost cause with a bow and a bad temper. And now the useless husband she'd been stuck with was asking to learn. Why, she said. Because you're better than me at it, I said. And pretending otherwise would be stupid. That earned me something unexpected. Not a smile. Qiao Yue did not smile. But the tension in her shoulders dropped about 2 degrees. Her grip on the knife loosened. She reached into her belt and pulled out something small. A wooden token, carved with a simple symbol, a mountain with a line beneath it. The wood was old and smooth, worn down by years of handling. My father made these, she said. Gave one to every hunter he trusted. She held it out. I took it. The wood was warm from her body heat. One token, one lesson, she said. Don't waste it. I turned it over in my hand. The carving was simple but precise. Whoever had made it had known what they were doing. I won't, I said. She nodded once. Then she turned back to her gear, and the conversation was over. I stepped outside. The system chose that moment to remind me it existed. A blue panel flickered into view, hanging in the air in front of me like a notification nobody else could see.
Companion potential detected. Qiao Yue, S rank, mountain hunting. Beast taming, tracking, combat, survival.
I stared at it. S rank. The second one. The second wife with a potential ranking that, based on the system's tone, made her sound like a strategic asset rather than a person. I closed the panel and looked back at the hut. Inside, Qiao Yue was cleaning a knife with the focus of someone defusing a bomb. She had no idea what the system had just told me. She had no idea the system existed. She just thought she was a hunter with a dead father and a territory to defend. Meanwhile, somewhere I couldn't see, other things were moving. In the village square, Wang Bo stood before his father. The morning market was thin. Fewer villagers than usual lingered near the well. A few glanced toward the Lin household at the edge of the settlement, where smoke had been rising earlier than it should. Wang Bo kept his voice low. The household's acting strange, he said. The deadbeat's hauling loads. The farming wife is working soil nobody touches. And the hunter wife brought back 3 rabbits yesterday. 3. from foothills that barely have one. Headman Wang leaned on his walking staff. His calculating eyes moved toward the edge of the village, where the Lin household's broken hut sat. Could be nothing, Wang Bo added. Could be, the headman said. But a man who owes me 12 silver doesn't haul ash and hunt game unless he's found something worth protecting. He tapped the staff against the ground once. Watch them. If they're hoarding, I want to know how much. Wang Bo nodded and faded back into the morning crowd. The headman remained, watching the distant smoke. Back at the hut, I turned the carved token over in my fingers. One token, one lesson, and a woman who could read a forest like a map, hunt anything that moved, and put me against a wall before I could blink. The system said S rank. Qiao Yue said one lesson. I figured I'd start there. I came back from the foothills with 3 rabbits and a decent pelt, feeling pretty good about myself. Then I walked into the hut. The hut I left that morning had been a disaster. Leaky roof, dirt floor, random piles of junk in every corner. The kind of living space that says, someone gave up here, and that someone was correct to give up. The hut I walked into was still a disaster, but now it was an organized disaster. Su Ruyan sat in the center of it, cross-legged, surrounded by neat rows of items I didn't even know we owned. A pile of rice grains on a piece of cloth, counted. 3 strips of dried boar meat on a string, measured. A cracked clay pot, a bent iron nail, 3 copper coins, and half a candle stub, arranged in a line like evidence at a trial. She had her ledger open on her knee. Her abacus sat beside her. The abacus beads weren't moving. That meant she'd already finished the math. I recognized that look. It was the look of someone who has done the calculations, doesn't like the answer, and is fully prepared to make that everyone else's problem. Sit, she said without looking up. I sat. We have, she said, 47 grains of rice, 2 days of dried meat, 3 copper coins, which buys nothing, a 12 silver debt to the village headman, and a roof with a hole in it large enough for birds. She paused. A bird actually came in this morning. It left. I think it found our living standards beneath its dignity. I almost laughed. Almost. The look on her face suggested that laughing right now would be a survival mistake. We also have rabbits, I offered, holding up the brace. Her eyes flicked to them, then back to the ledger. She entered them into the count without a word, and somehow the silence felt like a demerit. 3 rabbits, she said, writing. That extends our food supply by 2 days, which brings our total survival window to 4 days, assuming no one gets sick, injured, or decides to eat extra out of despair. For days. That was the timeline. I'd been hunting every day, bringing back what I could. I thought we were scraping by. Turns out we were scraping by in the sense that a man falling off a cliff is technically still moving downward. Your father was a merchant, I said. I didn't know why I said it. I'd heard whispers. Village gossip. The kind of thing people say when they think you're not listening, or when they don't care if you are. The ledger stopped moving. Su Ruyan looked at me. Her expression didn't change. She had the face of someone deciding exactly how much truth to spend. My father ran a trade caravan, she said, her voice flat. Silk, tea, iron tools. 12 wagons. 14 men. He was good at it. We were comfortable. She touched the abacus. Not to calculate. Just to touch it. Bandits hit the caravan on the eastern road 2 years ago. They killed the guards. Killed my father. Took everything. The wagons, the goods, the horses. All of it. She said it the way you'd read a shipping manifest. Line items. No emotion attached. I went to my father's relatives for help, she continued. They took the remaining inventory from the warehouse, said it was to manage the estate. Then they told me the caravan's debts were mine to settle. I was 19. I had no money, no caravan, no guards, and a stack of IOUs that apparently I was now responsible for. She closed the ledger. 3 months ago, they dumped me here. Told the village I was to be married. No dowry. No options. And the man they married me to. She looked at me. Was you. I held very still. There didn't seem to be a good response to that. I was the man she'd been dumped on. I was the punchline to a joke life had been telling at her expense. I wasn't expecting much, she said. The previous you spent his days drinking, gambling, and avoiding work with a dedication that was almost impressive. 12 silver in debt to a man who would absolutely collect it with your land, your labor, or your body if he could manage it. 12 silver. That number again. It followed me around like a dog that hadn't been fed. I expected to starve slowly in a leaking hut with a man who couldn't provide for himself, let alone 3 women. She looked at the rabbits again. I was wrong about the starving timeline. It's faster than I projected. So at least there's that. I sat there in the dirt, holding my rabbits, thinking about what she'd just told me. Bandits. A dead father. Robbed by her own family. Sold off like damaged inventory. And she was still here, counting rice grains, running the numbers, fighting the only war she had left, the one against arithmetic. That's when the system pulsed. A faint blue glow appeared in my vision, the same interface I'd seen with Mei Lan and Qiao Yue. The words materialized slowly.
Companion potential appraisal, active.
I focused on Su Ruyan. She noticed me staring. What? Nothing. Thinking. She narrowed her eyes, but returned to her abacus. The system finished its analysis.
Companion potential detected, S rank, commerce and administration.
I stared at it. S rank. 3 for 3. Mei Lan. S rank farming. Qiao Yue. S rank hunting. And now Su Ruyan. S rank commerce and administration. I had 3 wives with S rank potential, a leaking hut, 12 silver in debt, and 4 days of food. It was like being handed the keys to a palace and discovering the palace was on fire. Su Ruyan closed her ledger with a sharp snap. I've been calculating our debt schedule, she announced. Given your current income from hunting, assuming optimal conditions and no emergencies, you will repay Headman Wang in approximately 8 months. She let that sit. Assuming you actually hunt every day, which the previous you did not. I've been hunting every day, I said. The previous you also said that. I'm not the previous me. She paused, looked at me. The silence stretched. I reached into my belt and set 3 items on the ground in front of her. The rabbit pelts, a small pouch of copper from selling extras at the edge of the market, and the remaining strip of dried boar from the first kill. It wasn't much. It was maybe the least impressive financial presentation in the history of commerce. But it was real, and it was there. Su Ruyan stared at it. Then she picked up the pouch, counted the coins. Her fingers moved over the abacus. She recalculated. 14 days, she said quietly. What? At this rate, the food supply extends to 14 days. Not 4. I was working with the previous numbers. She set down the abacus. Her expression changed. It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't warmth. It was something more careful. The look of someone recalibrating a model they'd already given up on. You've been working, she said. Not a question. Every day. She looked at the pelts. The coins. The dried meat. I owe you an apology, she said. You don't. I do. I assumed you were the same. I wasn't. The original Lin Chen was gone. I was something else wearing his face, his debts, and his marriages. But she didn't need to hear that right now. I need someone I can trust with money, I said. I can hunt. I can track. But I can't count the way you can. I can't plan the way you can. You see problems before they happen. You see resources I'd walk right past. She said nothing. Take over the finances. All of it. The food, the debt schedule, the trade. I'll bring in what I earn. You decide how it's spent. Su Ruyan looked at me like I'd just said something suspicious. Which, given her life, was fair. Every time someone had offered her something, it had been followed by a knife in the back. But she reached for the ledger. If I'm managing the finances, she said, I need full control. No overriding my decisions. No spending behind my back. Done. And I need accurate reporting of everything you bring in. Down to the last copper. Done. She opened the ledger to a fresh page. Started writing. And then she smiled. It was small. Barely there. The kind of smile that shows up when someone who hasn't had control over their own life in 2 years suddenly gets a piece of it back. I didn't comment on it. Some things you just let be. The blue glow pulsed again.
Companion synergy, commerce and administration, online.
Then, stronger.
All 3 companions appraised, S rank. Household synergy unlocked. Combined household actions now yield exponential results.
I stared at the notification. Exponential results. Mei Lan could grow things that shouldn't grow. Qiao Yue could hunt things that shouldn't be hunted. And Su Ruyan could turn whatever they brought home into a strategy that actually worked. I looked at Su Ruyan, already deep in her ledger, abacus clicking. I looked at the system notification glowing in my vision. 3 S ranks. 1 leaky hut. 12 silver in debt. We have work to do, Su Ruyan said, not looking up. I already knew that. But for the first time, it sounded less like a death sentence and more like a plan. I didn't have long to appreciate the moment, because the system had more to say. A new notification bloomed across my vision, golden text hovering in the air like a demand letter from the universe itself.
7-day survival mission, feed and secure the household. Reward, construction blueprint.
7 days. I looked around the hut. The roof had a hole big enough to stargaze through. The walls were held together by optimism and rot. We had enough food for maybe 2 weeks if I kept hunting, which was generous only if you defined food as whatever I can kill before it kills me. And the reward was a construction blueprint, which meant the system knew we needed a real house, which meant the system had eyes, which meant I was being graded. Wonderful. I explained the mission to the others. I left out the part about glowing text only I could see, because a floating screen told me we have homework. Wasn't a conversation I was prepared to have. We have 7 days to stabilize this household, I said. Food, repairs, security. That's the objective. Su Ruyan looked up from her ledger. Define stabilize. Enough food to stop counting grains. Walls that keep wind out. A door that actually closes. She considered this for approximately 1 second. Then she reached for a blank page. The next morning, Su Ruyan called a household meeting. I hadn't known we did those. Apparently, we did now. She sat at the repaired end of the table with her abacus, her ledger, and an expression that said this was not a discussion. It was a briefing. Lin Chen hunts mornings and evenings, she said, clicking a bead into place. Qiao Yue supplements with smaller game and maps hunting zones. I'll manage distribution, trade surplus, and track every coin. She turned to Mei Lan. You'll handle soil rotation on the plot, composting, planting, whatever you need. I've allocated 3 hours of Lin Chen's afternoon for heavy labor. I hadn't agreed to that, but Su Ruyan's pen was already moving, and I sensed that my opinion on the matter was mostly decorative. Qiao Yue leaned against the doorframe, arms folded. The eastern ridge is picked clean. I'll mark new zones past the creek. Good, Su Ruyan said. Mark them on the map. I need to know travel times for scheduling. Qiao Yue actually nodded. I got the sense that Su Ruyan issuing orders was a natural force, like gravity. You didn't argue with it. You just fell in the direction she pointed. Mei Lan spoke last, quietly. The soil needs another round of ash. If I plant mountain tubers in the enriched section, they'll sprout in 5 days with proper care. 5 days, Su Ruyan repeated. She wrote it down. That fits. I sat back and watched. 3 women who barely tolerated each other a week ago were now coordinating like a team that had been together for years. Not because they liked each other, not because they trusted me, but because Su Ruyan had given them each a role that respected what they were actually good at. Sometimes management is just putting the right person in the right seat and getting out of the way. The next morning, Qiao Yue and I moved into the forest before dawn. She'd scouted a deer trail the day before. Fresh tracks, 2 sets, moving east toward the creek. 1 adult, 1 younger. You take the high ground, she said. I'll drive them toward you. How will you know where I am? She gave me a look that suggested this was the stupidest question she'd heard all week, which, given that we'd been up for less than an hour, was impressive. I'll know, she said. I climbed the ridge. I found a position between 2 pines, downwind, with a clear line of sight to the creek below. I knocked an arrow and waited. The system hummed faintly. A thin overlay appeared, highlighting the deer trail in pale green, with movement markers showing where the animals were likely to cross. Then something else appeared.
Hunter plus Hunter synergy active. Coordinated actions yield bonus tracking precision.
I blinked. The overlay sharpened. The movement markers tightened. Suddenly, I could see predicted paths I hadn't seen before, as if Qiao Yue's knowledge of the terrain was feeding directly into my system display. And then I heard her. A sharp whistle from the south, then the crash of brush. The deer bolted. The younger one broke left. The adult turned right, straight up the ridge, straight toward me. I drew. The system painted a weak point on the deer's shoulder. I released. The arrow hit clean. The deer stumbled, dropped, and skidded to a stop 10 paces from my position. Qiao Yue appeared from the tree below, breathing hard but grinning. Not bad, she said. High praise, from someone who'd threatened to break my fingers a week ago. We dragged the deer back together. I'd expected it to be miserable work. It wasn't. We moved in rhythm, adjusting grip and pace without speaking, falling into a coordination that felt practiced. The system chimed softly.
Synergy bonus applied. Harvest yield increased by 18%.
18% more meat, bone, and hide from a single deer, just because two people who knew what they were doing worked together instead of separately. I was starting to understand why the system called it exponential. Mei Lan was waiting at her plot when we arrived. She took one look at the deer carcass and her eyes lit up. Not at the meat. At the blood. Can I have the bones? She asked. And the blood. I looked at Qiao Yue. Qiao Yue shrugged. Sure, I said. Mei Lan crushed the bones with a flat stone, mixing the fragments with deer blood and the ash she'd already worked into the soil. She pressed mountain tuber cuttings into the dark, rich mixture, patting each one into place with careful hands. The system flickered.
Hunter plus farmer synergy active. Fertilizer efficiency increased. Crop growth time reduced by approximately 20%.
You're speeding them up, I said. Mei Lan looked at me, startled. The soil is just good, she said. Which was technically true, in the same way that calling a gourmet meal just food was technically true. The tubers that should have taken 5 days began sprouting pale green shoots by the end of the second. By day 4, we had a system. I hunted with Qiao Yue at dawn. I hauled materials for Mei Lan in the afternoons. Su Ruyan tracked every resource, traded surplus rabbit pelts for salt at the village edge, and somehow turned 3 copper coins into 6. I still didn't understand how she'd managed that. I decided not to ask, on the grounds that the answer might involve math. That night, we ate deer stew around the fire. And I noticed something. They were sitting closer. Not dramatically. Not like some sudden bonding moment where everyone realizes they're family now. Just closer. Qiao Yue was next to Mei Lan instead of across the room. Su Ruyan had her ledger open on her knee but wasn't writing in it. She was listening. Qiao Yue was telling a story about a boar that had chased her up a tree for 2 hours. He just sat at the bottom, she said, miming an enormous patient animal waiting below. Like he had nowhere to be. Like his whole day was ruined, and it was my fault. Mei Lan laughed. It was small and quiet, but it was real. Su Ruyan's mouth twitched. The boar won. Su Ruyan asked. The tree won, Qiao Yue said. I just survived. I watched them. 3 women who had every reason to hate this situation. Every reason to hate me. And they were sharing a meal, sharing a laugh, acting like people who had chosen to be in the same room. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was the absence of hostility, and in this household, that felt like a miracle. On the 7th morning, the system blazed gold.
7-day survival mission, complete. Reward, basic construction blueprint, unlocked. Permanent bonus, household stamina regeneration plus 15%.
A blueprint materialized in my mind. 4 plans. Wall specifications. A tiled roof. Separate rooms. A rail gate. A kitchen with ventilation. A garden plot with irrigation channels. I stared at it. This wasn't a patch on a broken hut. This was a home. A real one. The kind that said, people live here on purpose. I looked at the others. Mei Lan was kneeling by her tuber plot, which was now thick with green shoots. Qiao Yue was oiling her bow by the door. Su Ruyan was updating the ledger, because Su Ruyan was always updating the ledger. We got the blueprint, I said. Su Ruyan looked up. Show me. I described it. Every wall, every room, every detail the system had given me. Su Ruyan listened with her eyes half closed, building it in her head. Then she opened her ledger to a fresh page and began estimating material costs. We'll need timber, she said. Proper timber. And tools. And labor. We don't have money for all that. Not yet, she said. And the way she said it told me she was already 3 moves ahead. I looked at the blueprint still glowing in my mind. Then I looked at the rotting hut around us. 7 days ago, we were 4 strangers starving in a shack. Now we had food, a plan, and a blueprint for something that might actually last. The 12 silver was still out there. Headman Wang was still watching. And a real house would need real materials that real money would buy. But for the first time since I woke up in this body, I wasn't just surviving. I was building. Mostly, I was building a pile of ash and rotting leaves on a dirt patch that looked like it had given up on life years ago. But still, building. Mei Lan had been working her plot since dawn. She'd already doubled the size of it, expanding into a strip of ground near the tree line that nobody had ever bothered with because nothing had ever grown there. She was on her knees, hands dark to the wrist, pressing seeds into the enriched soil one by one like each one owed her money personally. I was hauling water from the well. Again, because apparently, in this world, water didn't come to you. You went to it. You carried it. And then you went back for more because the first trip wasn't enough for anything. I'd been a modern man with running water 2 weeks ago. Now I had arms like a draft horse and a deep personal grudge against buckets. I was setting the fourth load down near the plot when Mei Lan stopped moving. She'd been weeding along the tree line, pulling out the scrubby plants that grew between the tillable soil and the forest proper. Normal stuff. The kind of thing you'd expect a farmer to do. But she wasn't pulling anymore. She was staring at the ground. Her fingers were hovering over a patch of earth maybe 2 paces wide, and she had gone completely still. The kind of still that means the person isn't distracted. It means they found something. I set the bucket down. What is it? She didn't answer right away. She leaned closer. Her fingers brushed the soil, then the roots of a weed she'd half pulled. Then she sat back on her heels. The dirt is different here, she said. I walked over. I'll be honest. It looked like dirt. Darker, maybe. A little richer than the pale brown dust we'd been fighting all week. But I'd spent enough time around Mei Lan to know that if she said dirt was different, the dirt was different. Different how? She held up one of the weeds. The roots were tangled and stringy, same as any weed. But at the very ends, where the finest threads gripped the soil, there was something else. A faint glow. Not bright. Not dramatic. Not a beam of light shooting into the sky. Just a soft, pale luminescence clinging to the root fibers, like dew that had decided to become a nightlight. I crouched beside her. Okay, that's not normal. Mei Lan turned the root in her fingers, studying it the way Su Ruyan studied numbers. Carefully, completely. This is spiritual energy, she said. I waited for her to smile or explain that she was joking. She didn't. My mother told me about this, Mei Lan continued, her voice quiet but steady. Old stories. Before the great families sealed the spiritual lands, there were farmers who could feel the energy in the earth. They grew herbs that couldn't survive in normal soil. Herbs that could cure sickness, strengthen the body, enhance strength. She looked at me. I thought they were just stories. And now, she held up the root. The glow pulsed. Faint, but unmistakable. Now I think the stories were true. I stared at the glowing root for a long moment. Then I stared at the patch of dark soil. Then I stared at Mei Lan, who was already reaching for her basket of seeds. What are you doing? I asked, testing it. She pulled out a small, dark seed I didn't recognize. It was ridged and hard, nothing like the mountain tubers she'd been planting. What is that? Iron vine herb. She pressed it into the dark soil with her thumb. My mother kept a collection of rare seeds. She never had soil good enough to plant them in. She sat back and looked at the small mound of earth where she'd buried the seed. If the stories are true, this soil will grow it. And if it grows... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The look on her face said enough. I stood up. My knees cracked. My back ached. I was 20-something in a body that apparently hadn't been maintained properly, and the system's 15% stamina boost helped, but it didn't help with crouching. So how long until we know if it worked? I asked. Mei Lan looked at the soil. 2 days. Maybe 3. 2 days. I could handle 2 days. What I couldn't handle was what showed up on day 2. Village headman Wang walked through our gate like he owned the place. Which, given his expression, he probably believed he did. He wore his usual well-kept dark brown robes and carried that walking staff of his, the one that symbolized village authority. Wang Bo trailed behind him, looking like a particularly aggressive fence post. Wang Bo had been watching our household. That much was obvious. You don't develop that specific flavor of smugness without recent material to work with. Headman Wang stopped in front of the hut. He looked at it. He looked at the garden. He looked at me. Then he looked at the garden again, because apparently the garden was more interesting than the man standing next to it. Lin Chen, he said. His voice had the warm, generous tone of a landlord informing you that rent was due. I trust you haven't forgotten your obligations. The 12 silver. Of course. 8 months until it was due, but that had never stopped a man like Wang from collecting early. Early collection was how men like Wang bought their nice robes in the first place. I haven't forgotten, I said. Good. He smiled. It was the kind of smile that expected money to appear. Then you'll be pleased to know I'm prepared to accept partial payment. Today. Wang Bo shifted his weight, ready to be useful if useful was needed. I opened my mouth to say something that probably would have been stupid, but before I could, Su Ruyan stepped out of the hut. She had her ledger. She had her abacus. She had the expression of a woman who had been doing math for fun since sunrise and was now bored enough to do it on someone else's face. "Headman Wang," she said. "Polite. Cool. Not warm. How thoughtful of you to visit." She opened the ledger. "I've taken the liberty of reviewing all household debts and tax obligations." She turned a page, then another, then a third, because the sound of pages turning in silence is its own kind of weapon. "Your original ledger recorded 12 silver owed, due in 8 months. However, our actual tax obligation for this season, per the village charter, is 4 copper coins." She looked up. "We have already paid 6. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that has weight. Headman Wang's smile didn't disappear. It just stopped meaning anything, like a sign hanging over a closed shop. "That can't be right," he said. Su Ruyan turned the ledger around and held it out to him. "Please, verify." She had the revised figures. She had the original entries. She had the charter rates. She had, I suspected, the exact date and time Headman Wang had first decided to inflate the numbers, though she was too professional to say that part out loud. Wangbo looked at the ledger like it might bite him. Headman Wang looked at it like it already had. Uncle Tian, who had been sitting under the oak tree near the communal well, walked over with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who had been waiting for this moment for a very long time. He looked at the ledger. He looked at Headman Wang. He looked at the revised numbers. "The numbers appear accurate," Uncle Tian said, in the calm voice of a man delivering a verdict. Headman Wang's jaw tightened. Wang Bo's smugness evaporated like water on a hot stone. "I see," Headman Wang said. He took his staff and his son and what was left of his dignity, and he left. Su Ruyan closed the ledger with a soft click. She didn't smile, but there was a light in her eyes that said she was thinking about smiling, and that was enough for me. "You've been waiting to do that," I said. "I've been waiting to do that since yesterday," she said. "I just needed him to show up." 2 days after Mei Lan planted the seed, something green pushed through the dark soil. By day 3, it was a plant. A real one. Sturdy stem, dark leaves with silver veins running through them like rivers on a map, and a root system that glowed faintly when you pulled back the dirt. Mei Lan pulled one leaf, crushed it between her fingers, and smelled it. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something closer to disbelief. "Iron vine herb," she whispered. "It worked." She looked up at me, and there were tears in her eyes she was trying very hard to pretend weren't there. "My mother was right," she said. "She was right all along." I didn't say anything. Some moments don't need commentary. Even from me. Especially from me. Su Ruyan appeared beside us, ledger in hand, already calculating. "How much is it worth?" I asked. She looked at the plant. She looked at her ledger. She did something rapid on the abacus that I couldn't follow. "At market? 40 silver. Maybe 50, with the right buyer. 40 silver. The debt was 12. The house materials would cost 30 or more." "Do it," I said. She was already packing. Su Ruyan left for the market town at dawn with the iron vine herb wrapped in oiled cloth and Qiao Yue at her side as escort. The system flagged their combined trip with a synergy tag I'd never seen before. Something about complementary skills creating better trade outcomes. I didn't fully understand the mechanics. I wasn't there for any of it. Here's how it went, as far as I could piece it together afterwards. Qiao Yue told me most of it, in the manner of someone filing a report she resented having to file. The trade house sat at the top of the paved street, 2 stories of dark timber with a blue banner hanging over the door. Merchant Zhao received them himself. He was middle-aged, with a neatly trimmed black beard and hair oiled into a tight topknot, and he wore river blue silk that had never been within reach of a field. He unwrapped the oiled cloth on the counter with soft, uncalloused hands. He looked at the herb for a long moment. Then he snapped open a jade-handled fan and began tapping it slowly against his palm. 20 silver, he said. Su Ruyan did not answer. The fan tapped. "It is a fine specimen, but the market for spirit-grade herbs is thin this season, and I would be holding it a long while. 20 is generous, for a single root brought down by a village girl." He had made an assumption. She let him keep it 3 seconds longer than was comfortable. "You are pricing a windfall," she said. "This is not a windfall." She set her ledger on the counter. She did not open it. "You have assumed I found this." That there is one, that I need coin today, and that I will not come back. On those assumptions, 20 is generous. You are correct. Then she turned her head slightly toward the door. Qiao Yue was standing in it. She had not come any further inside. There was dried mud to her knees, a recurved bow across her back, a hunting knife at her hip, and pine needles still caught in her hair. She was not looking at Zhao at all. She was watching the street, the way a person watches ground they intend to cross again. The fan stopped. We grow it, Su Ruyan said. We know the soil it takes, and she knows the ground it comes from. You are not buying a root, Merchant Zhao. You are buying first refusal on every one that follows it. The fan resumed. Slower. 40, Zhao said. 50. And you hold that price for the next 4. Zhao looked at the herb on his counter. Then he looked at the woman in the doorway with mud to her knees, who had still not looked at him once. 45, he said, and I will throw in the cart. Su Ruyan opened the ledger. They came back 2 days later with a cart. A real cart, pulled by a mule I'd never seen, loaded with timber. Good timber. Dark, straight-grained hardwood. The kind of wood you build gates with. The kind that lasts. There were tools, too. Saws, hammers, chisels, iron nails. A plane. A level. Coils of rope. Bags of mortar. Su Ruyan jumped down from the cart, brushed dust off her maroon dress, and looked at me. Then she looked at the hut, the rotting walls, the hole in the roof, the dirt floor that turned to mud every time it rained. She dropped the cart's lead rope on the ground. We're building a real house, she said. Not a question, not a suggestion, a fact, delivered with the same certainty she brought to every number she'd ever calculated. I looked at the cart. I looked at the hut. I looked at the 3 women standing in front of me. 2 weeks ago, the man whose body I inherited couldn't feed any of them. Now we had timber, tools, and a plan. Headman Wang was still out there. Headman Wang still believed the 12 silver was owed, regardless of what Su Ruyan's ledger had proved. And building a house meant we'd be visible. Really visible. The kind of visible that makes people with power ask uncomfortable questions. But the blueprint was ready. The materials were stacked in front of me. And for the first time, we had enough. I picked up a hammer. It was heavy, the handle was rough, and it smelled like the trade shop it had come from. It was the best thing I'd held since I woke up in this body. Where do we start? Su Ruyan looked at me like I'd asked what fire was. We start, she said, by tearing that down. She pointed at the hut. I turned to look at it. The roof had a hole I could put my head through. The walls were held together by rot and optimism. The door was a suggestion at best. She was right. It had to go. I pulled the first timber off the wall, and the whole structure groaned like it had been waiting for permission to collapse. Honestly, it had probably been structurally dead for weeks. We'd just been too busy surviving to notice. Qiao Yue stripped the thatch off the roof in careful sections. Some of it was still dry enough to reuse as packing material. Su Ruyan had already planned for that, naturally. Nothing wasted. Not on her watch. Mei Lan cleared the debris from inside, sorting useful scraps from actual garbage. Broken clay pots, a rusted nail or 2, 3 mouse skeletons, which I chose not to think about. By midday, the hut was a pile of materials and memories I didn't have. The sun was high. My back already hurt. And I was genuinely, sincerely happy. That was new. Qiao Yue paused to drink water and looked at the cleared plot. Bigger than I thought. Everything looks bigger when you're not sharing it with mice, I said. She snorted. That was basically a standing ovation from Qiao Yue. We worked through the afternoon. The blueprint helped more than I expected. It wasn't just a drawing. It overlaid on my vision through the system like an architect whispering in my ear. Cut here. Join there. This beam carries that load. Without it, I would have built a slightly larger hut and called it Progress. With it, we built something real. The frame went up over 4 days. Thick timber walls, straight and snug. A tiled roof that didn't leak. A real door that actually closed. Separate bedrooms. A kitchen with a proper vent. A small courtyard with space for a garden. 6 days of work. Everyone did their part. I did the heavy lifting, which was fine because my body had been tempered by weeks of hauling meat through the mountains. Qiao Yue handled the high work, scrambling across beams like she'd been born on rooftops. Su Ruyan managed materials, measured twice, cut once, and corrected my mistakes before I made them. Mei Lan quietly turned the courtyard dirt into something that resembled soil. She mixed ash, decayed leaves, and something dark she'd carried from her plot near the tree line. By the time the walls were up, she'd already planted a row of seedlings along the south-facing wall. I looked at the finished compound on the sixth evening. Tiled roof, sturdy gate, thick walls. You could have put it in the market town, and people would have walked past it without laughing. In Azure Mountain Village, it might as well have been a palace. Qiao Yue sat on the new gate, legs swinging. Su Ruyan was inside, already doing something with the ledger, probably calculating the remaining coins down to the last fraction. I stood in the courtyard and let myself feel it for a moment. A few weeks ago, this household had nothing. Less than nothing. We had debt, a rotting hut, and 3 women who looked at me like I was a problem they hadn't figured out how to solve yet. Now we had a home. The next morning, a girl appeared at the gate. She was maybe 16, with twin braids and the kind of nervous energy that suggested she'd been standing there for a while before working up the courage to knock. "Is Mei Lan here?" she asked. I recognized her. Li Fong. She lived near the eastern fields. I'd seen her working the soil a few plots over from Mei Lan's. Mei Lan came to the gate, wiping dirt off her hands. Again, Li Fong bowed slightly. "I saw what you did with the ash and the leaves. On your old plot, the village said it wouldn't grow anything, but the tubers came up faster than anyone else's." Mei Lan blinked. Nobody had ever asked her about her methods before. At least, nobody who wasn't laughing. "I was wondering," Li Fong said, choosing each word like it might explode. "If I could help in your garden, in exchange for learning how you do it." I watched from the courtyard. Mei Lan looked at the seedlings she'd planted, then back at Li Fong. "If you're willing to work," Mei Lan said quietly, "I'll teach you what I know." Li Fong's face lit up like someone had handed her a festival gift. Just like that, we had our first ally outside the household. It wasn't a powerful warlord or a mysterious benefactor. It was a teenage girl who wanted to learn how dirt worked. But you start somewhere. That afternoon, I found Mei Lan in the kitchen doorway. She was hanging something above the frame. A bundle of dried herbs, tied with rough twine. Mountain thyme and woundwort, arranged in a specific pattern I didn't recognize. "What's that?" I asked. "My mother used to hang one over every door," she said. "She said it marked a home as lived in. Not just sheltered, lived in." She adjusted the bundle, stepping back to check the placement. Then she looked at me and smiled. Not the polite, careful smile she'd given me when I brought home the first boar. Not the tentative gratitude of someone who wasn't sure if the kindness would last. This was warm, open, real. I realized it was the first time she'd treated the house like it was hers. Not a shelter, not a temporary camp. Home. I didn't say anything. Some moments don't need commentary, even from me. What I did instead was cross the kitchen and kiss her. She went completely still, the kind of still that meant her brain had stopped issuing instructions to the rest of her body. Then her hand came up and closed around the front of my tunic, and she kissed me back, and the bundle above us shed a small rain of dried thyme over both our heads. When we stopped, her face had gone the deep red of a woman who had spent years not being looked at and had built an entire personality around not minding. "You should," she started. She stopped. "Tried again. The Eastern plot," she said. "It needs turning." "It does. I'm going to go and do that now." "Okay." She walked out into the courtyard with her back very straight, and she did not turn the soil. She stood in the middle of the garden for a while with one hand pressed against her mouth. Then she laughed, once, quiet, mostly to herself, the sound of someone checking a number that had come out better than expected. Then she turned the soil. Here's what I didn't know was happening. Half a mile south, on the hill overlooking the western approach to Azure Mountain Village, 2 men stood among the trees. Village headman Wang gripped his walking staff and stared down at the new compound. The tiled roof caught the late afternoon sun. The walls were straight. The gate was solid. The garden was already growing. His son Wang Bo stood beside him, arms folded. "They built that in 6 days," Wang Bo said. Headman Wang said nothing. "Their house is better than ours," Wang Bo added, because apparently his father needed that pointed out. Headman Wang's knuckles whitened around the staff. He had watched this household for months. The useless beggar with 3 burdensome wives. The laughingstock who couldn't feed himself. The debtor who owed him 12 silver and had no way to pay. And now that same man had built a compound that made the Wang family estate look like it needed repairs. "Find out where the timber came from," Headman Wang said. "Find out who helped them. And find out exactly how much money they have." Wang Bo nodded and turned down the hill. Headman Wang stayed a moment longer, staring at the tiled roof. Then he walked home in silence. I was in the courtyard, checking the fence posts Qiao Yue had helped me set, when I heard the gate crash open. Wang Bo didn't knock. He never did. Knocking would have implied that the people inside had a choice about letting him in. He walked through our gate like he was inspecting a property he already owned. 3 men followed him. Villagers, roughly built. The kind who always seemed to be available whenever Wang Bo needed someone to stand behind him and look large. Mei Lan was in the garden, kneeling beside her seedlings. She looked up as they entered, her hands still dirty with soil. This land belongs to the Wang family, Wang Bo announced. He said it the way someone reads a receipt. Flat. Bored. Like the conclusion was already settled and the rest of us just hadn't caught up yet. Mei Lan stood slowly. This is our plot. The deed, Wang Bo shoved her. Not hard. Not the kind of shove that leaves a bruise. The kind that says you don't matter enough to hit properly. She stumbled backward, her knee catching the edge of a planting bed, and she fell into the dirt. Something went very quiet inside my head. I had my hunting knife on my belt. I always carried it. My hand found the handle before I made the conscious decision to reach for it. The wooden grip was warm and familiar, and for about 2 seconds, the only thing I wanted in the entire world was to see Wang Bo bleeding on the ground in front of me. I took 1 step forward. A hand closed around my wrist. Su Ruyan. She had come out of the main house without me hearing her. Her grip was surprisingly firm for someone with arms that thin. Her dark eyes locked onto mine, and she gave her head the smallest possible shake. He's waiting for you to do that, she whispered. His father wants a reason to seize our assets. You draw blood. They call it assault on the headman's son. We lose the house. We lose the land. We lose everything. She was right. I hated that she was right. I let go of the knife. Wang Bo was watching us with a smirk that suggested he'd seen the whole thing and found it entertaining. He'd seen the husband want to fight and the wife hold him back. In his world, that meant he'd already won. Pack your things, he said. You have until tomorrow. Mei Lan was still on the ground. There was dirt on her cheek and her hands were trembling, but she wasn't crying. She was looking at her seedlings, crushed where Wang Bo's boot had landed. Qiao Yue appeared on the roof. I don't know how she got up there so fast, but she had an arrow knocked and drawn, aimed directly at Wang Bo's chest. Her amber eyes were the color of something that could kill you without regret. Wang Bo saw her. His smirk dimmed slightly. Take it easy, he said, holding up one hand. This is official village business. Aim at his throat, I said to Qiao Yue. I was mostly serious. She won't shoot, Su Ruyan said calmly. She stepped forward, smoothing her worn maroon dress. And he won't stay? Will you, Wang Bo? Wang Bo looked at Su Ruyan, then at Qiao Yue's arrow, then back at Su Ruyan. We'll settle this in the village square, he said. In front of everyone. Bring your deed. He left with his 3 men, walking slowly, the way people walk when they want you to believe they were leaving on their own terms. I helped Mei Lan up. She brushed the dirt off without a word, but I could see her jaw was tight. You okay? I asked. She nodded once. Su Ruyan was already walking back inside. Get the ledger, she said. The blue one. Second shelf. What's the plan? She paused at the door and looked back at me. For a moment, she almost smiled. We're going to take everything he has left. Publicly. The village square was full by midday. Word traveled fast in a settlement of 40 houses. A land dispute involving the headman's family was the kind of entertainment people would skip meals for. And frankly, most of them had skipped meals for less. Headman Wang stood near the old oak tree, his wooden staff planted in the dirt. Wang Bo flanked him on one side. Uncle Tian sat on the stone bench beneath the tree, his wrinkled hands folded over his knees. I stood across from them with Su Ruyan beside me. She carried her leather-bound ledger and her abacus, the way a soldier might carry a sword. Mei Lan and Qiao Yue stayed back. This wasn't their fight. Not yet. Headman Wang didn't waste time. The Lin household occupies land that was improperly granted. The original deed is flawed. The land reverts to the Wang family as the senior household of the village. He said all of this with the patient authority of a man who had been making decisions for this village for 30 years and had forgotten what it felt like to be contradicted. Uncle Tian looked at Su Ruyan. You have evidence? I do. Su Ruyan opened her ledger and produced a folded document. It was old. The paper was yellowed and the ink was faded, but the village seal at the bottom was still legible. This is the original land deed, registered with the county office 14 years ago. It grants this plot to the Lin family in perpetuity. There is no reversion clause. There is no conditional term. The land was never Wang family property. She handed it to Uncle Tian. He examined it carefully, turning the paper over, checking the seal. Headman Wang's expression didn't change. Deeds can be forged. They can, Su Ruyan agreed. Which is why I also brought this. She opened her ledger to a marked page and produced a second set of documents. These were not old. The ink was fresh. For the past 3 years, Headman Wang has been collecting taxes from the eastern quarter of the village. The official tax rate is 4 copper per household per season. Headman Wang has been collecting 8. She let that sit for a moment. The crowd shifted. A few people exchanged looks. Furthermore, Su Ruyan continued, her voice steady and precise. The additional collections were recorded in the village tax log as road maintenance fees. No road in the eastern quarter has been repaired in 3 years. I checked. She turned to the 3rd page. In fact, the only structure renovated with village funds in that period was a storage building on the Wang family estate. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Uncle Tian looked at Headman Wang. The old man's face was unreadable, but his eyes had gone very still. Is this accurate? Uncle Tian asked. Headman Wang's jaw tightened. The girl is lying. She has no access to. I copied the figures from the village tax log myself, Su Ruyan said. 3 nights ago. The log is kept in the headman's office. The lock was broken. It has been broken for months. I watched Headman Wang's face lose color the way a cup loses water through a crack. Slowly, then all at once. He looked at Wang Bo. Wang Bo looked at the ground. Uncle Tian folded the documents carefully and placed them on his knee. The deed is valid, he said. The Lin household retains its land. The tax irregularities will be reviewed by the village council. He paused. Headman Wang, you will apologize to the Lin family. Publicly. And you will step back from any further claims on their property. Headman Wang stood very still for a long moment. His hand was tight on his staff. I could see the knuckles go white. He looked at me. There was no warmth in it. No contrition. Just the flat stare of a man calculating how much he'd lost and who to blame for it. I apologize, he said. The words came out like he was coughing up stones. Uncle Tian nodded once. This matter is closed. The crowd didn't cheer. This wasn't that kind of story. But something had shifted. I could see it in the way people looked at us. Not with mockery. Not with pity. With calculation. A few villagers bowed their heads slightly as they passed. Not deep bows. Just small acknowledgments. The kind that said, I see you now. We walked home in silence. Mei Lan was waiting at the gate. She had cleaned the dirt off her cheek and replanted the crushed seedlings. They were already standing straight again. Qiao Yue was still on the roof, bow across her lap. She watched us come in and said nothing. Su Ruyan closed the gate behind us, set her ledger on the table, and sat down. 12 silver, she said quietly. He'll try again. I know. But not today. I looked at the compound. The tiled roof. The thick walls. The garden with its tiny green shoots reaching toward the sun. We built this. All of us. In 6 days, with blistered hands and a system blueprint and the kind of stubbornness that shouldn't logically produce a house. And now we defended it. Not with a knife. Not with an arrow. With a ledger. I sat down across from Su Ruyan. She was already recalculating something, her fingers moving across the abacus beads without looking. Thank you, I said. She didn't look up. Don't thank me, she said. Just don't make me do it again. I looked at her for a moment. Her father's caravan had gone under. Her relatives had taken everything that wasn't nailed down, and then they had sent her up a mountain to marry a man the whole village agreed was worthless, because that was cheaper than feeding her. She had arrived here as a line in somebody's accounts. And this afternoon she had walked into the headman's own courtyard, opened a book, and taken our land back without once raising her voice. You won't have to do it again, I said, because you're not going to be the only one holding this together. That isn't how. I leaned across the table and kissed her. The abacus went over. Beads scattered across the floor in every direction, which, knowing how she felt about that abacus, was easily the most reckless thing I had done all day. She didn't pull back. She also didn't move for about 3 seconds, which from Su Ruyan was a complete emotional collapse. Then she sat down, folded her hands in her lap, and looked at the table. The color climbed up her neck and settled in her ears. That was inefficient, she said. It was. You have scattered 412 counted beads. I have. I will need to recount them. You will. She did not recount them. She sat there with her ears burning and her hands folded, and after a long moment she said, very quietly, "Thank you." I decided it would be ungracious to point out that she had told me not to. 3 days later, Qiao Yue came back from the foothills carrying something I'd never seen her carry before. Concern. She dropped a brace of rabbits by the kitchen door, which was normal. She kicked off her boots, which was also normal. Then she sat on the courtyard bench and stared at the mountain tree lean without saying a word, which was extremely not normal. Qiao Yue didn't do silence. She did warnings, complaints, and the occasional threat. Silence was new. I sat down next to her. What? The animals are moving, she said. Animals move. That's kind of their whole thing. Not like this. She pointed toward the western ridge. The deer are gone from the lower slopes. The pheasants cleared out of the pine belt 2 days ago. Even the boars are pulling south, and boars don't run from anything unless something bigger is telling them to. I'd noticed fewer tracks on my last 2 hunts. I'd assumed it was a seasonal shift. Qiao Yue clearly had a different theory. What's pushing them? I don't know, she said. And I don't like not knowing. She was quiet again for a moment. Then she looked at me. I want to go past the ridge. There it was. The black ridge. The jagged dark stone boundary that marked the edge of the safe hunting grounds. No birdsong. No vegetation on the upper slopes. Just black rock and dark mist, and, apparently, whatever was powerful enough to scare every animal in the foothills into relocating. Qiao Yue had told me back when we'd first established our partnership that she never crossed it. Her father had warned her, and her father had disappeared beyond it. Your father said never to go past the ridge, I said. My father went past the ridge, she corrected. That's different. She wasn't wrong. There was a difference between a warning and a rule. One was advice. The other was a boundary someone chose to enforce. Qiao Yue had enforced hers for 9 years. She was done enforcing it. I thought about it. The animals migrating meant our hunting grounds were thinning. If something was driving the herd south, it would keep driving them, and eventually there'd be nothing left to hunt on this side of the ridge. Our food supply wasn't infinite. Su Ruyan had stretched our resources beautifully, but she couldn't stretch what didn't exist. Also, and I'll be honest about this, I was curious. The system had flagged the deep mountains as a region of interest weeks ago. It kept pinging subtle alerts every time I hunted near the tree lean, little notifications I'd been swiping away because I had enough problems. Fine, I said. We go together. Tomorrow. Full gear. Qiao Yue looked at me like she'd expected an argument. That's it. You already made the decision, I said. I'm just choosing to come with you instead of watching you leave alone and wondering if you're coming back. She considered this. Fair. We left before dawn. The morning fog was thick enough that I couldn't see 10 paces ahead. Qiao Yue moved through it like she had a personal relationship with every tree on the path. I followed her footsteps, which was the only option since the fog had turned the trail into a suggestion rather than a road. By mid-morning, the fog lifted, and the black ridge stood in front of us. It looked exactly how it sounded. A wall of dark stone cutting across the landscape like someone had driven a crack through the mountain range. The rock was nearly black. The upper slopes were bare. No moss, no grass, no lichen. Just stone and shadow. A weathered wooden post stood at the base of the trail, carved with old marker symbols. The boundary marker. Qiao Yue stopped in front of it. She didn't speak for a long moment. Her hand went to the carved wooden token hanging from her belt. The one her father had made. The one she'd given me as a symbol of trust. He stood right here, she said. I was 12. He told me the mountains beyond the ridge weren't like the foothills. He said something had changed in the deep forest. Something that made the old hunting routes unsafe. What kind of something? He didn't say. She touched the marker post. He just said, don't come past the ridge until you understand what you're walking into. Then he walked past it and didn't come back. That was 9 years ago. She'd honored his warning for 9 years. That's not nothing. Whatever was on the other side of this ridge, it had taken her father, and she'd spent nearly a decade building the courage to follow him. I didn't make a joke. This wasn't the moment. Ready? I asked. She drew her bow and knocked an arrow. No, she said. Let's go. The deep forest on the other side of the ridge was wrong. I don't mean dangerous. I mean wrong. The trees were enormous, old-growth pines with trunks wider than I could reach around. The canopy was so thick that noon looked like dusk. The moss on the ground had a faint green luminescence, like it was digesting sunlight it had stored from a different era. And it was silent. No birds. No insects. No wind in the branches. Just the sound of our footsteps and my breathing, which was getting louder the deeper we went because my body had decided that silence in a forest was a threat and wanted to make sure I was aware of it. The system was pinging constantly. Little alerts I'd been ignoring were now stacking up. Environmental readings. Threat indicators. A faint purple outline highlighting anomalies in the terrain. I was so busy reading the system alerts that I almost missed the smell. Musky. Wet. Wrong. I grabbed Qiao Yue's arm. She'd already seen it. The bear came out of the tree lean like a landslide with teeth. It was massive, easily twice the size of any bear I'd seen in the foothills. Its fur was dark iron gray, stiff and coarse like metal wire. Its eyes had a dull amber glow that had no business being in an animal. Spirit touched. The system flagged it immediately.
Iron fur bear, spirit touched. Threat level, high.
Hi. Wonderful. I love a helpful system alert. The bear charged. Qiao Yue fired. The arrow hit the bear's shoulder and bounced off the fur like it had struck plate armor. Iron fur. The name wasn't decorative. The bear didn't slow down. Move. Qiao Yue shoved me sideways and dove in the opposite direction. The bear crashed through the space we'd been standing, tore a sapling out of the ground by accident, and wheeled around faster than something that size should have been able to. I scrambled behind a boulder. My mind was doing the thing it did when everything went sideways, running through options at a speed that felt less like thinking and more like panic with a filing system. Brute force wasn't an option. The arrows couldn't penetrate. My hunting knife was a joke against iron fur. The bear was faster, stronger, and very clearly angry about something. Terrain. Use the terrain. The system pulsed. A faint overlay appeared in my vision, highlighting the landscape. A ravine to the left, about 15 paces. Narrow. Rocky walls. If the bear followed us in, it would be channeled into a space where its size became a disadvantage. Qiao Yue. Ravine. Left. She didn't question it. That was the moment I realized how much had changed between us. A few weeks ago, she would have argued. Now she just ran. I bolted left. The bear followed. The ground shook. I could hear it behind me. That sound will stay with me. A wheezing, grinding roar that vibrated in my chest. Like the bear's throat wasn't entirely built for sound anymore. I dove into the ravine. Qiao Yue was already on the opposite ledge, above the narrowest point, bow drawn. The bear squeezed in after me. The ravine walls compressed it. Its shoulders scraped stone. It couldn't raise its front paws fully. Qiao Yue fired straight down. The arrow hit the bear's skull from above, where the fur was thinnest. It skidded off, but drew blood. The bear roared and lunged upward toward her. I drove my knife into the gap behind its front leg, the one soft spot the system had highlighted. The blade sank into the hilt. The bear twisted. I let go or get crushed. I let go. Qiao Yue fired again. And again. Arrow after arrow into the wound I'd opened. The bear staggered, slammed against the ravine wall, and collapsed. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I lay on my back in the ravine, breathing, staring at the strip of gray sky above me. Is it dead? I asked. It's not moving, Qiao Yue said. Good enough. I waited another 30 seconds before getting up, partly to make sure it was dead, mostly because my legs had stopped cooperating. Qiao Yue climbed down and retrieved her arrows. 3 were intact. 2 had snapped. She looked at the bear's corpse with an expression I couldn't read. This wasn't normal, she said. Bears don't grow this big. And the eyes. The amber glow was already fading. But it had been there. Something in this forest had changed the bear. Altered it. The system had called it spirit touched. What touches a bear with spirit energy? I asked. Qiao Yue didn't answer. The cave was 50 paces from the ravine, half hidden behind a curtain of hanging moss. I only noticed it because the system flagged a faint energy signature coming from inside. I pushed the moss aside. The smell hit me first. Earthy, rich, like a greenhouse after rain. Then the glow. Bloodvine roots. Dozens of them, growing from the cave walls in thick, dark red tendrils. They pulsed with a faint crimson luminescence, like veins carrying light instead of blood. I didn't need the system to tell me these were valuable. Mei Lan had described them once. back when she'd been explaining the difference between normal agriculture and spiritual agriculture. She'd said bloodvine roots were the foundation for advanced spiritual cultivation, that they could strengthen the body and accelerate crop growth. She'd also said she'd never seen one in person and probably never would. I carefully dug out a bundle of the roots, wrapping them in cloth. The system confirmed the identification and added a note about optimal handling conditions. Then I saw the trap. It was half buried in the cave floor, covered in years of dust and moss. A hunting trap, iron-jawed, rusted, with a trigger mechanism I recognized because Qiao Yue had shown me the design. She crossed the cave in 3 strides and knelt beside it. Her hand was shaking. The trap was marked. A small carved symbol on the iron plate. A mountain, with a single line beneath it. Qiao Yue's father's symbol. She'd shown it to me on the wooden token. "This is his," she said. Her voice was flat, controlled. The kind of controlled that takes more effort than screaming. "He made this trap. He was here." The trap was old. Years old. The rust had eaten deep into the iron. But the symbol was still visible. He'd been in this cave. He'd gone past the ridge, into the deep forest, found this cave, and set a trap here. Why? What was he hunting? Or what was he hunting that had driven him this far from the village? The cave offered no answers. Just roots and rust, and the ghost of a man who'd walked into the dark and never walked out. I didn't push. I didn't ask questions. I stood back and let Qiao Yue sit with it. After a while, she stood up. She didn't take the trap. She touched the symbol one more time, then turned away. "We should go," she said. We made it back to the compound just after dark. Su Ruyan was waiting at the gate with a lantern in one hand and a ladle in the other. She looked at the blood on my clothes, the mud on Qiao Yue, and the bundle of roots under my arm. She said nothing. She held the gate open. Mei Lan was in the kitchen. The smell of hot stew hit me like a wall of mercy. I sat down at the table, and my entire body collectively resigned from its duties. Su Ruyan set a bowl in front of me. Then she saw the bloodvine roots. Her eyes went wide. "Where did you find those?" "Deep mountain cave," I said. "Past the Black Ridge." She looked at Qiao Yue. Qiao Yue was sitting by the fire, cleaning her bow. She hadn't spoken since we'd left the cave. Su Ruyan was smart enough not to push. She sat down, ladled stew, and let the silence hold. I ate. The stew was good. Everything hurt. I was alive. After the bowls were empty and the fire had burned down, Qiao Yue spoke. "Thank you." 2 words. From Qiao Yue, that was a speech. "For what?" I asked. She looked at the fire. "For coming with me. For not telling me not to go." She paused. "He was there, Lin Chen. My father. He was in that cave. I don't know what happened to him. But he was there." I nodded. "We'll find out," I said. I meant it. She looked at me then. Properly looked. The way she read a track she wasn't sure of, checking it twice, deciding whether it would hold her weight. Then she leaned over and kissed me. It was not a careful kiss. Qiao Yue didn't do careful. She took it the way she took a slope she had decided to take, at speed, committed long before her foot landed. Then she sat back and looked at the fire again, as though nothing had occurred. Her ears had gone red. The rest of her face was doing an admirable job of pretending otherwise. "That wasn't a promise," she said. "I know. I go where I want." "I know that too." "Good." She went back to cleaning her bow. I noticed she was cleaning a stretch of it she had already cleaned twice. I didn't mention it. I'm not brave. The fire crackled. The compound walls held back the dark. And somewhere past the Black Ridge, in a cave full of glowing roots, a rusted trap sat waiting for an answer that was 9 years overdue. The next morning, Mei Lan got to work. She laid the bloodvine roots across the kitchen table and examined them the way a jeweler examines a stolen diamond. Carefully, reverently, like she was afraid the roots might realize they were being handled and decide to stop being valuable. I watched from the doorway. She'd already butchered a portion of the iron fur bear meat, the cuts laid out in precise rows on a wooden board, separated by fat content, grain direction, and what I assumed was some farming classification system I would never understand. "What are you making?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Something that hasn't been made in this village for a very long time." "Okay, that's either very encouraging or very terrifying." "Sit down," she said. "You'll need to eat all of it." That was not the reassuring answer I was hoping for. Here's the thing about Mei Lan. When she was quiet, she seemed shy. When she was working, she was a completely different person. Her hands moved with a certainty that had nothing to do with guesswork. She sliced the bloodvine roots into thin sections, crushed them with a stone mortar, and mixed the paste into a clay pot of boiling bear meat broth. The smell hit me before the steam did. Rich, heavy, like someone had boiled a forest fire and added garlic. Mei Lan ladled the stew into a bowl and placed it in front of me. Eat, she said. All of it. I picked up the bowl. The liquid was dark red, almost black, and faintly luminescent. It glowed. The stew I was about to eat was glowing. I looked at Mei Lan. It's glowing. Yes. Food shouldn't glow. Eat it. I ate it. The first swallow tasted like iron and earth and something that might have been lightning, if lightning had a flavor. The second swallow was easier. By the third, I'd stopped tasting anything at all because my entire body had decided to have a conversation with the stew, and my mouth was not invited. Then the system triggered.
Cultivation awakening, body tempering initiated.
The notification floated in front of me in those clean blue letters only I could see. Below it, another line appeared.
Spiritual energy detected. Host body is compatible. Tempering process will begin immediately.
Immediately was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. The pain started in my hands. A deep, grinding ache, like someone had reached inside my bones and was slowly tightening a vice around the marrow. It moved up my arms, across my shoulders, down my spine. Every muscle fiber felt like it was being individually unplugged and rewired while still attached to the rest of me. I didn't scream. I'd like to say that was because I was tough. It was mostly because I couldn't breathe. Mei Lan caught me as I fell off the stool. Her arms were thinner than mine, but she held me with a grip that suggested she'd been hauling soil and timber long enough to develop some opinions about upper body strength. I'm fine, I managed. You're not, she said, but you will be. That was 3 days. 3 days of lying on a straw mat in the bedroom, while every bone in my body reminded me that it existed. My muscles would spasm, then lock, then release, then spasm again, in a cycle that felt like a very thorough and deeply hostile massage. The system helpfully displayed a progress bar in the corner of my vision. It moved at roughly the speed of a glacier watching another glacier. My wives took turns. Mei Lan sat beside me for the first night, pressing cool cloths to my forehead and forcing a bitter herbal tea down my throat at intervals she determined through some method I was too delirious to question. She didn't sleep. I know because I woke up twice, and both times she was there, watching me with that quiet focus she usually reserved for Soil. Qiao Yue took the second day. She was less gentle about it. At one point, I vaguely remember her propping me upright against the wall and saying, "Stop groaning. You sound like a dying boar." I was, in fact, trying very hard not to sound like a dying boar. But my body had opinions. Su Ruyan managed the third day and the household simultaneously. I could hear her outside the bedroom door, rattling off inventory numbers to Li Feng, updating the ledger, negotiating something with a passing peddler who had apparently wandered into the village looking for iron pots, all while checking on me every 20 minutes with the precise, unsentimental efficiency of a nurse who also happened to be running a logistics company. On the morning of the fourth day, I opened my eyes and the pain was gone. Not reduced, not faded. Gone, like it had never been there. I sat up. My body felt different. Lighter, but denser, if that makes any sense. Like someone had taken me apart, removed the unnecessary parts, and put me back together with better materials. The system confirmed it.
Body tempering complete. Strength increased 40%. Speed increased 35%. Bone density significantly enhanced.
40%. I didn't know exactly what that meant in practical terms, but I was about to find out. I walked outside. The morning air hit my skin, and I could feel individual currents in the wind. My hearing was sharper. My eyes tracked movement in the tree line that I would have missed entirely a week ago. There was a wooden training post in the courtyard. Qiao Yue had set it up the week before, for bow practice. It was a solid length of oak, about as thick as my forearm, sunk 2 feet into the ground. I walked up to it. I set my stance. I threw a straight punch. The post exploded. Not cracked. Not splintered. Exploded. The top half of it disintegrated into a shower of wood fragments that scattered across the courtyard like aggressive confetti. I stared at my fist. My knuckles were fine. Not even red. Well, that was new. Naturally, Zhou Hu happened to be walking past the compound gate at that exact moment. Because of course he was. The universe has excellent comedic timing. He stopped. He stared at the destroyed training post. He stared at me. His mouth opened and closed twice without producing any sound, which I thought was a nice touch. Morning, Zhou Hu, I said. What did you do to that post? Hit it. He looked at the post again. He looked at my fist. He looked at the post again. Something was clearly happening behind his eyes. You could almost see the gears turning. They were small gears, and they were turning slowly, but they were turning. You think you're tough now, he said. I blinked. I had just shattered a solid oak post with my bare hand. And this man was asking if I thought I was tough. It was like watching someone challenge a thunderstorm to a fist fight. Zhou Hu, I said, as reasonably as I could. I would really prefer not to fight me, he said. Right now? In the square. He said it loud enough for the 3 villagers walking past to hear. Which, I suspected, was the point. Zhou Hu had been embarrassed before. He wanted a public win to cancel out the public losses. He wanted his dignity back. I understood the impulse. I just didn't think this was going to go the way he thought. The village square had a reasonable crowd by the time we got there. Word traveled fast in a village of 40 houses. Especially when the word was Lin Chen destroyed a training post with his hand, and Zhou Hu wants to fight about it. Zhou Hu rolled his shoulders and cracked his neck. He was bigger than me, heavier. He'd been in more fights. He had the confident stance of a man who had spent his entire life being the largest person in any given argument. I, on the other hand, had the confident stance of a man whose bones were now approximately as dense as iron. Zhou Hu swung first. A wide, heavy right hook aimed at my jaw. I sidestepped. Not dramatically. Not impressively. I just wasn't there when his fist arrived. He swung again. I leaned back. His fist passed through the air where my face had been a quarter second earlier. He threw a third punch. I ducked under it, stepped into his guard, grabbed the front of his tunic, and threw him. It wasn't a technique I'd learned. It wasn't a system-promoted move. My body simply knew what to do with the extra speed and strength, and what it wanted to do was put Zhou Hu on the ground. He hit the dirt hard. Dust kicked up. The crowd went very quiet. Zhou Hu lay there for a moment, staring at the sky with the expression of a man who was rapidly reconsidering several life choices. I gave him a hand up. He flinched before taking it. Same time next week? I asked. He walked away without answering. The crowd parted to let him through. Then they turned back to me. The looks on their faces had changed. A few weeks ago, they'd looked at me the way you look at a stray dog that keeps coming back. Now they looked at me the way you look at a wolf that just moved into the neighborhood. I couldn't decide if that was better. That evening, Su Ruyan found me in the courtyard. She was carrying her ledger in one hand and a hand-drawn map in the other, which was her version of showing up with bad news. She spread the map on the table. It covered the surrounding region, 6 villages, 3 trade routes, and the market town. She'd marked each village with a small circle and each trade route with a line. 3 villages have stopped sending traders, she said. She pointed to the circles. These 2 stopped 2 weeks ago. This one stopped 5 days ago. What about the merchant caravans? Nothing. No caravans through the northern pass in 8 days. The last peddler who came through charged triple for iron and wouldn't say why. She looked at me. Her dark eyes were steady, but I could see the tension in her jaw. Su Ruyan had grown up in a merchant family. She understood what a silent trade route meant. It meant something was blocking it. Bandits? I asked. Maybe. Or something worse. She tapped the map. The villages that stopped trading are all on the north road. Whatever's happening, it's moving south. She folded the map. Toward us. We stood there in the quiet of the courtyard. The compound walls felt solid around us. The tiled roof was warm above. The garden was growing. For weeks, I had been building something. A home. A family. A life that wasn't a joke. And now something was coming down the road to take it. Before I could say anything, I heard shouting from the village gate. Not the casual shouting of a normal evening. The sharp, urgent shouting of people who had seen something they didn't want to see. I was already moving when the gate came into view. A man had collapsed just inside the palisade. He was wearing the kind of clothes a merchant's assistant would wear. Decent cloth, now torn and stained with so much blood it looked black in the fading light. His left arm was wrapped in a filthy bandage that was doing absolutely nothing to stop the bleeding. Villagers stood around him in a loose circle, doing what villagers always do when something terrible happens. staring, muttering, hoping someone else would handle it. I pushed through. The man grabbed my wrist with his good hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes were desperate. Bandits, he said. His voice was raw. Large group. 40, maybe 50 men. They hit Green Mill Village 2 days ago. Burned everything. Killed anyone who didn't run. He coughed. Something dark came up. They're coming south, he said. Down the main road. They'll be here by tomorrow. He let go of my wrist and sagged against the dirt. I looked at the villagers. Some of them had heard everything. Some were still pressing forward, trying to catch the words. All of them had the same look on their faces. Fear. The kind you can't argue with. 40 or 50 men. Tomorrow. I turned and looked back toward the compound. Toward the walls I'd built. The home I'd fought for. The 3 women who had started as burdens and become the only thing in this world that mattered. Su Ruyan was already walking toward me. She had the map in her hand. She'd heard everything. I didn't need to say it. She already knew. Something was coming. And this time, I couldn't hunt it down and trap it in a ravine. By morning, the village had lost its mind. I'd seen panic before. In my old life, I once watched an office building evacuate during a fire drill. People shoved through doors, climbed over desks, abandoned shoes. It was embarrassing but ultimately harmless, because the fire wasn't real. This fire was real. Families were stuffing belongings into baskets and running for the tree line. 2 households had already packed a cart and left, heading south with no plan beyond a way. A woman I didn't know was screaming at her husband about the rice stores while her children clung to her legs. 3 old men sat by the communal well, saying nothing at all. And where was village headman Wang during all this? Excellent question. Wang was inside his estate with the gates barred. Wang Bo stood outside with his arms crossed, turning away anyone who came asking for orders. I watched a farmer beg him for guidance. Wang Bo told him to go home and lock his door. Brilliant military strategy. Truly visionary. The bandits would never think to break down a door. Uncle Tian found me at the compound gate. The old man moved slowly, leaning on his walking stick, but his eyes were sharp. He'd seen 60 years of village life. He'd survived famines, floods, and at least 2 previous bandit scares. He didn't waste time. You have walls, he said. I have walls. Food. Weapons. A plan. I have food. Some weapons. I'm working on the plan. He studied my face the way a doctor studies a patient. Then he nodded slowly. The village needs someone to lead the defense. Wang has locked himself away. Wang Bo couldn't organize a drinking contest. He paused. I'm asking you. I looked at him. Then I looked past him, at the village square full of frightened people who had mocked me a few weeks ago, who had called me a beggar, who had laughed when Zhou shoved me in the dirt. These same people now needed me to save their lives. I wanted to say something sarcastic. I really did. But Uncle Tian was standing there with the weight of 40 families on his shoulders, asking a former beggar with 3 wives and a hunting knife to be their last hope. All right, I said. I'll do it. The system chose that exact moment to interrupt. A blue panel materialized in front of me, hovering in the air like the world's most poorly timed pop-up advertisement.
Village Defense Quest. Protect the settlement. Reward, Village Leadership.
Village leadership. Not a sword. Not a technique. Not a pile of silver. Leadership, which meant the system already knew something I was just beginning to understand. If we survived this, nothing in this village would ever be the same. I dismissed the panel and turned to Uncle Tian. Gather everyone in the square. I need every person who can lift a tool. The next few hours were the most exhausting of my life, and I once carried 4 baskets of rotting leaves up a mountain. Su Ruyan took charge of logistics before I even finished asking. She walked through the village with her ledger and abacus, counting every grain of rice, every iron tool, every piece of dry firewood. Within 2 hours, she had a complete inventory of the village's supplies taped to the inside of her ledger. It was not encouraging. 62 people, she announced, standing in our courtyard with the ledger open. 41 can work. 12 are elderly or injured. 9 are children. What about weapons? Hunting bows, 4. Knives, 11. Farming tools that could work as weapons, roughly 20. Actual combat training among the villagers. She paused. Zhou claims he can fight. Zhou claims a lot of things. I'm aware. She organized the women and elderly into a supply chain. Every household brought their food stores to the Lin compound, which would serve as the fallback point. The logic was simple. If the outer village fell, everyone retreated behind our walls. Su Ruyan counted and cataloged every contribution. If we survived, she'd know exactly who owed what to whom. If we didn't, the ledger would burn with us. Either way, the woman had her priorities straight. While Su Ruyan handled the logistics, Mei Lan disappeared into the fields. I found her 2 hours later, crouched at the edge of the northern path with a stick in her hand, drawing in the dirt. She'd sketched the entire village perimeter. Every building, every path, every drainage ditch. "I need to show you something," she said without looking up. She pointed to 3 spots along the main approach. "Here, here, and here. The ground is soft. If we dig pitfalls, anyone stepping in them won't get out quickly." Then she pointed to a patch of dense brush along the eastern tree line. "Devil's snare. It grows naturally here. The thorns are curved. They catch clothing and skin and don't let go. If we guide the approach toward these patches, the bandits will have to either go through them or slow down to go around. You know where every thorn bush in this village is?" She looked up at me. The faint smudge of dirt on her cheek had grown into a full streak. She looked like she'd been rolling in the soil, which, knowing her, she probably had. "I know where every plant in this village is," she said quietly. I believed her. The system had called her S rank in spiritual agriculture. But watching her map out defensive terrain by identifying thorn bushes from memory, I realized the label didn't do her justice. She wasn't just a farmer. She read the land the way Su Ruyan read a ledger. Mei Lan returned to her map and added a final mark near the southern fence. "Firebreak here. The houses are too close together. If they set fires, the whole village burns. But Devil's Snare is green and damp. It doesn't burn easily. If I lay cut vines along the southern edge, it slows the fire. You can do that." "I can try." I left her drawing in the dirt and went to find Qiao Yue. Qiao Yue was already in the forest. She'd taken the village men, all 8 of them, into the tree line along the main path. By the time I caught up, they'd dug 2 pitfalls and lined the bottoms with sharpened sticks. The men were exhausted, covered in dirt, and visibly terrified. But Qiao Yue moved among them like she was born to it. She showed them where to dig, how deep to go, how to camouflage the openings with branches and loose soil. "The pit doesn't need to kill," she told them. Her voice was calm and flat. "It needs to slow. A man stuck in a hole is a man not swinging a sword. That's all we need." The village men nodded. They didn't argue with her. They didn't question her instructions. A week ago, most of them wouldn't have taken orders from a woman. Now they were too scared to care about pride. Qiao Yue had set 3 types of traps along the main path. Pitfalls in the soft ground. Rope snares in the underbrush, designed to catch ankles and yank. And a series of low log barriers that would force anyone coming through to bunch up, making them easy targets for arrows. The system tagged her work with a label I'd seen before. Mountain hunting synergy. She was treating the bandits the way she treated dangerous prey. Funnel them, slow them, control the terrain. I watched her direct a villager to move a log 3 feet to the left. She studied the angle, adjusted it again, and nodded. The precision was unsettling. "You're enjoying this," I said. She didn't smile, but her amber eyes flickered with something that wasn't quite fear. "I'm not enjoying it," she said, "but I'm good at it." She was. That was the terrifying part. By evening, the preparations were as done as they were going to get. Su Ruyan had the compound stocked with food, water, and medical supplies. Mei Lan had mapped every choke point and fire risk in the village. Qiao Yue had turned the main approach into a kill zone that would make any mountain predator think twice. It wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough. 40 or 50 bandits against 8 men with farming tools and 4 bows. The math didn't work, but it was what we had. The sun dropped behind the western ridge. The village went quiet. Families who hadn't already fled locked themselves in their homes. Lanterns were doused. Fires were put out. I stood at the compound gate with Su Ruyan's map in my head, Mei Lan's terrain analysis committed to memory, and Qiao Yue's trap layout burned into my mind. Then Qiao Yue appeared on the roof of the compound. She was breathing hard. She'd been running. Lin Chen. I looked up. Her face was barely visible in the last light, but I could see her expression clearly enough. "Torches," she said. "In the tree line. A lot of them." "How many?" She hesitated. That was when my stomach dropped, because Qiao Yue never hesitated. "More than 50, she said. "A lot more." I stared at the darkening forest. Somewhere beyond the trees, torchlight flickered. Dozens of lights, winding through the forest like angry stars descending from the mountain. The wounded merchant had said 40 or 50. The wounded merchant had been wrong. The first scream came from the south end of the village. Then another. Then a lot of them. I grabbed my hunting knife and headed for the gate. Qiao Yue was already on the roof, arrows laid out in neat rows beside her, bowstring taut. She'd arranged her arrows the way a bartender lines up shots before a busy night, organized, efficient, and deeply concerned about running out. The bandits hit the first pitfall trap about 30 paces from the village edge. The scream was memorable. 2 men dropped straight down into a pit lined with sharpened stakes. The men behind them stumbled into the rope, snares Qiao Yue had set between the pits. One moment they were charging. The next, they were dangling upside down by their ankles like preserved hams in a cellar. 6 down, Qiao Yue called from the roof. That was the good news. The bad news was that 6 was a rounding error. They kept coming. I could see them now, dark shapes pouring through the tree line, torchlight catching on blades and rusty iron. They stepped over the pits once they saw them. They cut the rope snares. A few fell into the second line of traps, but the rest just flowed around them like water around stones. I'd been hoping the traps would break their charge. Instead, they'd just gotten the bandits annoyed. Annoyed was not the same as stopped. Lin Chen, Qiao Yue loosed an arrow. I heard a grunt from the darkness. Then a body hit the dirt. They're past the outer line. 15, maybe 20, heading for the gate. I moved to the gate. The wooden bar was thick, hardwood, the same timber we'd used for the walls. It would hold against a shoulder. It would not hold against a battering ram. The first bandit reached the gate and hammered it with his shoulder. It didn't budge. He hammered again. Still nothing. Then about 8 of his friends showed up, and they all hammered it together, which was significantly less encouraging. I braced my back against the wood. Each impact sent a jolt through my spine. The body tempering had made me stronger, but strength doesn't help you when you're playing the role of a doorstop. Qiao Yue, how many at the gate? 9. More coming. I could hear it in the wood. The gate was holding, but it wouldn't hold forever. Timber has opinions about being slammed by a mob, and eventually it would share those opinions by breaking. An arrow thudded into the gate from above. Then another. Qiao Yue was firing straight down into the crowd at my back. Each shot was followed by a scream or a curse, sometimes both. The gate shuddered. A crack opened along one of the planks. And then, just as I was calculating how many seconds I had before the whole thing splintered, the pounding stopped. I didn't trust that for a second. I was right not to. Through the crack in the gate, I saw orange light blooming. Not torchlight. Something brighter. Something with teeth. They were setting the village houses on fire. Lin Chen. Qiao Yue's voice had gone flat. That was worse than shouting. Qiao Yue flat meant Qiao Yue scared. They're burning the outer buildings. The ones east of the square. The smoke it's going to screen them. I pulled back from the gate and looked east. Flames were crawling up the walls of old man Chen's storage shed. Then the Liu family's kitchen caught. The fire spread with the casual efficiency of something that had done this before. Within minutes, thick gray smoke was rolling across the village toward the compound. Scar. It had to be Scar. The bandit leader. The man who'd presumably woken up this morning and thought, what this raid needs is more war crimes. He'd realized the gate was too strong. The traps had slowed his vanguard. My household's defenses were better than expected. So he'd switched tactics, burn the village to blind us, then flank through the smoke. Clever. I hated clever enemies. Give me a stupid one any day. The smoke hit the compound like a wall. My eyes burned. My throat closed. I could hear coughing from inside the courtyard. Su Ruyan, the village women, the elderly. People who'd come here for shelter. The gate was still intact. But if the fire reached the compound walls, none of that would matter. Our walls were hardwood, sealed with pitch. They'd burn beautifully. The fire would eat our compound the way it was eating the village, methodically, hungrily, and without filing a permit. Then I heard running footsteps inside the courtyard. Not toward the gate. Toward the east wall. Mei Lan. She was carrying armfuls of thick green vines, devil's snare, the same thorny plants she'd mapped that morning. She'd identified them as non-toxic, fire-resistant, and common along the village's eastern perimeter. At the time, I'd nodded and filed that under interesting Mei Lan facts. Turns out it was filed under things that will save all our lives. She dropped the vines at the base of the east wall and started laying them in overlapping layers, creating a barrier about 2 feet thick. The vines were damp, fibrous, and packed so densely they smothered oxygen. A firebreak. A crude, improvised, botanical firebreak. Where she'd gotten the vines in the middle of a burning village at night, I had no idea. I suspected she'd pre-staged them, because Mei Lan didn't improvise. Mei Lan planned, quietly, while everyone else was shouting. The fire reached the empty lot beside the compound. The flames licked toward the east wall, hungry and fast. They hit the devil's snare. The vines hissed. Steam rose. The fire pushed, but the damp fibers refused to catch. The flames curled back, searching for another path, and found nothing but bare earth that Mei Lan had already cleared. The wall held. The fire passed us by, moving north toward houses that were already empty. Mei Lan stood there, soot on her face, hands raw from thorns, breathing hard. She looked at me. I looked at her. She nodded once, then went back for more vines. That was Mei Lan. No drama. No speeches. Just a woman who'd looked at a wall of fire and decided it was a soil problem. The smoke was still thick. I could barely see the gate. But the gate was still standing, and the compound was still standing, and nobody inside was dead yet. Small victories. But the night wasn't over. And through the smoke, I could hear something worse than fire. Footsteps. A lot of them. Coming from the east. Scar's flanking maneuver had begun. The smoke was thick enough to chew. I could hear the crunch of boots on gravel, the creak of something heavy being carried between men, and the low, ugly laughter of people who expected this to be easy. I moved away from the gate and ran along the inside of the east wall. My eyes were burning. My lungs weren't doing much better. The firebreak Mei Lan had built was holding, but the smoke it produced was a wall of its own, and I was standing in it. Then the wall exploded inward. Not all of it. A section maybe 4 paces wide, right where the mortar was thinnest. A heavy log ram, basically a tree trunk with rope handles, punched through the timber like a fist through wet paper. Splinters flew. Dust and smoke billowed. And through the gap came Scar. He was exactly as ugly as you'd expect from a man who called himself Scar. Broad, scarred, built like someone had started with a normal person and kept adding muscle until the seams showed. He carried a heavy iron saber in one hand like it weighed nothing. Behind him, 3 more bandits squeezed through the breach. The courtyard was about to become very crowded. I didn't have time to think. I had my hunting knife, the same rusted blade I'd taken into the foothills what felt like a lifetime ago, and the body tempering that had turned me from a starving villager into something considerably harder to kill. Scar saw me and grinned. It was the grin of a man who'd done this 100 times and never been the one bleeding at the end. "You're the one who's been making this difficult," he said. I didn't have a witty response. I had a knife. He swung first. The iron saber came down in a diagonal arc that would have split me from shoulder to hip if I'd been standing where I'd been half a second earlier. I wasn't. The body tempering had made me fast, 35% faster, according to the system, though I hadn't had time to appreciate the number until now. I dodged left and slashed at his exposed side. My knife caught his leather armor and skidded. The man was wearing layered hide thick enough to turn a blade that wasn't driven with full commitment behind it. He countered with a backhand swing. I rolled under it, came up inside his guard, and drove my shoulder into his chest. It was like hitting a tree. He stumbled half a step. That was it. The 3 bandits behind him fanned out, trying to circle me. I couldn't let that happen. 1 Scar was bad enough. 4 against 1 in a smoke-filled courtyard was a math problem I wasn't going to win. I kicked a broken plank off the ground and hurled it at the nearest bandit's face. He flinched. I used the half-second to reposition, putting my back against the intact section of wall. Scar came again. This time the swing was horizontal, designed to cut me in half regardless of which way I dodged. I jumped backward. The blade clipped the wall where my stomach had been and buried itself 2 inches into the timber. That gave me maybe 1 second while he wrenched it free. I closed the distance and stabbed. Not at his armored torso, at the gap between his bracer and his sleeve, where the forearm was exposed. The knife went in. Scar roared. Not a death scream. An angry roar, the kind a man makes when you've hurt him enough to make it personal, but not enough to stop him. He backhanded me across the face with his free hand. I'm not ashamed to say it launched me. I hit the ground hard, tasting blood, my vision swimming. The man hit like a collapsing wall. I rolled to my feet just as he ripped the knife out of his own arm and came at me again. This was not going well. The 3 bandits had regrouped behind him. The courtyard was filling with smoke. I couldn't see the gate anymore. I couldn't see the roof where Qiao Yue had been. I could see Scar. That was more than enough. He swung. I ducked. He swung again. I sidestepped. He kicked me in the ribs, and this time I didn't dodge. I wasn't fast enough, and I felt something crack. Not broken. Cracked. The kind of crack that lets you know the bone is considering its options. I stumbled sideways, one arm wrapped around my ribs, knife in the other hand, and tried to figure out how many more hits I could take before considering became broken. The answer was not many. Then something small and paper-wrapped flew past my head. It hit Scar directly in the face. The packet burst on impact, releasing a cloud of reddish-brown powder, ground dried peppers, sulfur, and something else Su Ruyan had prepared. She'd called it her contingency packet. I'd assumed that was a euphemism for running away. Scar screamed. Not a roar. A scream. The kind of sound a man makes when his eyes feel like they're being removed with hot spoons. He staggered backward, one hand clawing at his face, the saber swinging wildly in the other. I didn't waste the opening. I stepped in and drove the knife up under his armor, into the soft tissue below his ribs. The blade sank deep. I felt it scrape something that definitely wasn't supposed to be scraped. For one perfect second, I thought it was over. Then Scar did something I hadn't planned for. He didn't fall. He screamed again, rage, not pain, and swung the saber in a blind horizontal arc. No aim, no technique, just a man swinging heavy iron because his body refused to accept what his wounds were telling it. I tried to dodge. I wasn't fast enough. The saber caught me across the ribs. Not the cracked side, the other side, which I suppose was considerate of him. It opened a line of fire from my hip to my sternum, cutting through the leather and cloth like they weren't there, because apparently they weren't. The force threw me sideways. I hit the ground hard. The knife pulled free from Scar's body, and blood, mine, I couldn't tell, sprayed across the packed dirt. I tried to get up. My arms pushed. My ribs informed me, in no uncertain terms, that getting up was no longer a service they offered. Scar was still standing, still screaming, still blind, but standing. I was not. The courtyard spun. Smoke, firelight, the shapes of bandits moving in the haze. Everything tilted. Scar wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, blinking through the powder residue. He couldn't see clearly, but he could see enough. He looked down at me. He raised the saber. I couldn't move. I could barely breathe. Every inhale felt like swallowing broken glass. The cut across my ribs was bad. Not needs stitches bad. Needs a miracle bad. This was it. The part of the story where the protagonist dies in a dirt courtyard because he brought a hunting knife to a saber fight. Then 2 shadows crossed in front of me. Qiao Yue landed first. She dropped from the roof. I don't know how. The wall was 10 feet high, and she put herself directly between me and Scar. She had her recurved bow raised. Not knocked, held horizontally like a staff. Scar's saber came down. Qiao Yue caught it on the bow. The wood cracked. The bow flexed. But it held, just barely, the limbs bending under the force of the blow. Qiao Yue's arms shaking, her feet sliding back in the dirt. She was strong. Scar was stronger. But she didn't need to win. She needed to not lose for a few more seconds. Beside me, Mei Lan appeared. I don't know where she'd come from. The kitchen, the garden, the fire break. I had no idea. She was there. She knelt beside me, hands already moving. She pressed something against the wound, a wad of crushed leaves that smelled bitter and sharp, the kind of plant I'd have walked past 100 times without noticing. The bleeding slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. Hold still, she said. Like I was going somewhere. I wanted to tell her to run. I wanted to tell both of them to run. Scar was wounded but still standing, still armed, and still very much interested in killing everyone in this courtyard. But I couldn't speak. The breath wouldn't come. Scar shoved Qiao Yue sideways. She stumbled but didn't fall. She reversed her grip on the cracked bow and brought the lower limb up in a strike that caught Scar across the jaw. It didn't hurt him, but it made him angry, and angry people make mistakes. Except he wasn't the one about to make a mistake. I was the one on the ground, watching 2 women fight a man twice their size because I'd failed to finish him. And that was when the system spoke. Not a notification. Not a quest prompt. Something deeper. Something that bypassed my eyes entirely and went straight into the back of my skull.
Household synergy surge, danger sense. Triggered, bond threat detected. All household members in proximity. Temporary enhancement, speed plus 60%, perception plus 80%, pain suppression active. Duration, 120 seconds.
2 minutes. 120 seconds. I felt it hit like a wave of ice water. The pain didn't disappear. It got quieter, shoved into a box somewhere in the back of my mind where it could yell all it wanted and I wouldn't have to listen. My muscles loosened. My vision sharpened. The smoke was still thick, but suddenly I could see through it. Every shape, every movement, every grain of dust suspended in the firelight. I could see Scar's weight shifting to his left leg. I could see the blood still leaking from the wound I'd put under his ribs. I could see Qiao Yue's cracked bow, held in a defensive guard, her amber eyes locked on his chest, reading his breathing. I could see Mei Lan beside me, one hand pressing herbs against my wound, the other gripping a small garden trowel like she was considering whether to use it. 2 minutes. That was what the system was giving me. 2 minutes to end this. I stood up. Mei Lan made a sound behind me, something between a protest and a gasp. I didn't blame her. The wound across my ribs had been deep enough to see bone 30 seconds ago. Now it was just a problem for later. Later being the key word. Scar heard me rise. He was still blinking, still pawing at his eyes with his free hand. The pepper powder had done its job. He couldn't see clearly, but he could hear, and he knew where I was. Good. I wanted him to know. His saber came in fast, a wide horizontal slash aimed at where my head used to be. Emphasis on used to be. I ducked under it. Not barely. Not by inches. I ducked under it with time to spare, close enough to see the individual nicks in the blade's edge as it passed over my hair. 114 seconds. I stepped inside his guard. The system was feeding me information like it had downloaded a combat manual directly into my spine. Every muscle fiber was operating at full capacity. Every joint moved with a precision I had never possessed before. Scar swung again. A downward chop this time, the kind of strike designed to split a man from shoulder to waist. I sidestepped. The saber hit the dirt where I'd been standing and sank 3 inches into packed earth. That was how hard he was swinging. 90 seconds. I didn't waste movement. No flourishes. No dramatic speeches. This wasn't that kind of fight. I circled to his blind side, the right, where the pepper had hit worst, and drove my hunting knife into the gap between his chest plate and his shoulder guard. It sank to the hilt. Scar roared. His left arm swung back in a wild backhand that would have taken my head off if I hadn't already been moving. I pulled the knife free and jumped clear. Blood sprayed from the wound. Not the slow leak from before. This was arterial. He was dying. He just didn't know it yet. 60 seconds. Scar turned toward the sound of my breathing. His eyes were streaming, red, ruined. But he raised his saber one more time. Because of course he did. The man had been leading raids long enough that giving up wasn't in his vocabulary. I respected that, in the same way you respect a wasp that keeps trying to sting you after you've already pulled its wings off. He charged. I could see everything. The shift of his weight. The angle of his blade. The exact point where his lead foot would plant. I stepped left. His saber cut through smoke. I stepped right. His follow-up sliced air. Then I was behind him. I drove the knife upward through the back of his leather armor, between the 3rd and 4th ribs, angled toward the heart. He went rigid. For a moment, the courtyard went silent. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Scar looked down at the blade protruding from his chest. Then he looked over his shoulder at me. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. He fell. The impact shook the ground. I stood over him. 40 seconds left on the clock. Nowhere left to use them. The 3 remaining bandits stared at their leader's body. Then they stared at me, a bleeding man with a knife in his hand, standing over the corpse of the most dangerous fighter any of them had ever known. I'm told that first impressions are important. They ran. Not a tactical retreat. Not a fighting withdrawal. They dropped their weapons, scrambled over the broken wall, and ran into the smoke like startled rabbits. Qiao Yue didn't let them get far. She was on the roof before I could say anything, firing her last 3 arrows into the smog. I heard a scream, a crash, and then the wet thud of someone hitting a pitfall trap. The village men chose that moment to find their courage. Zhou Hu. Yes, that Zhou Hu. came around the corner of the compound with a woodcutter's axe in his hands and 6 villagers behind him. They looked terrified, but they were moving forward, and at that particular moment, that was enough. They hit the retreating bandits from the flank. Qiao Yue's traps did the rest. Men fell into pits. Snares caught ankles. One bandit ran directly into a thicket of devil's snare and discovered, very unpleasantly, why Mei Lan had told everyone to avoid it. It wasn't a battle. It was a rout. I watched from the courtyard. Or rather, I tried to watch. The edges of my vision were going dark. The surge was fading, and my body was remembering that it had a hole in it. The last thing I saw clearly was Qiao Yue dropping from the roof. Then Mei Lan's hands on my chest, pressing harder. Then Su Ruyan, appearing from somewhere inside, eyes wide, holding torn cloth bandages. Then the ground, rushing up to meet me. I remember thinking, I really need to stop bleeding on things we just built. After that, nothing. The first thing I noticed was the ceiling. Not the sky. Not the thatch with its permanent leak. An actual ceiling, made of proper timber, with joints that fit together cleanly. This was new. The second thing I noticed was the pain. My ribs felt like someone had packed them with broken pottery and then sewn me back up around the shards. Every breath came shallow and careful, like my lungs were negotiating terms with whatever was left of my chest. The third thing I noticed was Su Ruyan. She was asleep in a chair next to the bed, her head resting on the edge of the mattress, her hand wrapped around mine. Her hair was loose, falling across her face, and her normally immaculate dress was wrinkled and stained with something dark. My blood, probably. Her ledger was closed on the floor beside her. That was how I knew it was serious. Su Ruyan without her ledger was like a general without a sword. I tried to move my fingers. She felt it immediately, her head snapping up, those sharp dark eyes blinking away sleep and focusing on me with an intensity that made me want to confess to something. You're awake. Apparently. She squeezed my hand once, hard enough to make a point, then released it. 3 days, she said. You lost a dangerous amount of blood. Mei Lan kept a blood-stopping poultice on the wound for 18 hours. If she hadn't been there, you would have died. I turned my head, slowly, toward the window. Mei Lan was sitting on a low stool by the sill, grinding something in a stone mortar. A small clay pot sat on the windowsill, steaming. She looked up when she heard me, and the smile she gave me was quiet, tired, and completely without sarcasm. I never thought I'd be grateful for someone's weird plant knowledge, I said. But here we are. Mei Lan didn't respond to that. She just lifted the clay pot, poured a dark liquid into a bowl, and brought it to the bedside. Drink, she said. All of it. I drank. It tasted like boiled dirt filtered through old leather. I managed not to gag, mostly because I suspected Mei Lan would just make me drink another one. The compound was quiet, clean. The damage from the fight, the broken gate, the scorched east wall, the rubble, had been cleared. I could tell because the courtyard visible through the bedroom doorway looked nothing like the war zone I remembered collapsing in. You've been busy, I said. Qiao Yue organized the repairs, Su Ruyan said. The village men helped. The village men helped, I repeated. The same village men who watched us build this compound and did nothing. The same. How generous of them. Su Ruyan's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. Circumstances change. Qiao Yue came in through the doorway then, bow still across her back, and stopped when she saw I was sitting up. For a moment nobody said anything. 3 days ago all 3 of them had put themselves between me and a man with a saber. I had spent months thinking of this household as something I was responsible for, a weight I'd been handed and had decided to carry. It hadn't occurred to me, until I woke in a clean bed with my hand already held, that the carrying went both ways. Qiao Yue crossed the room, leaned down, and kissed my forehead. Brief, rough, closer to an inspection than affection. Don't do that again, she said. Mei Lan kissed my cheek and said nothing at all, which from her was the loudest of the 3. Su Ruyan didn't move from the chair. She only tightened her hand around mine and stared at the wall, with the expression of a woman who had concluded that crying was inefficient and intended to hold that line. All 3 of them were red to the ears. So I suspect was I. You're all being very strange, I said. You died a little, Qiao Yue said. We're allowed. I wanted to ask more, but my body had its own agenda. The medicine was pulling me back under, and the ceiling went blurry before I could argue. The next time I woke, Uncle Tian was sitting in the courtyard. I could see him through the doorway, perched on a bench Qiao Yue had built from scrap timber, his hunched frame wrapped in his faded gray clothes, a small wooden box resting on his knees. He looked like a man who had practiced what he was going to say. I sat up. Slowly. The pottery shards in my ribs had been replaced with something duller and more manageable. Progress. Mei Lan appeared and helped me stand. I did not enjoy needing the help. I enjoyed the walking even less. But I made it to the courtyard bench, and Uncle Tian inclined his head. Lin Chen. Uncle Tian. He opened the box. Inside, nestled in cloth, were 3 small porcelain jars. Even from a bench away, I could smell the herbs. Sharp, medicinal, expensive. Recovery pills, he said. From the county apothecary. They cost 4 silver. For silver. That was more than most families in this village saw in a season. I can't pay you back for these, I said. They are not alone. He closed the box and set it beside me. They are a gift. From the village. I looked at him. He looked at me, his wrinkled face unreadable. The village held a meeting yesterday, he continued. Headman Wang locked himself in his estate during the attack. His son hid in the granary. The villagers defended their own homes, but the line held because of your household. The walls that stopped the bandits were yours. The traps that killed them were Qiao Yue's. The firebreak that saved the East Quarter was Mei Lan's. The supplies that fed everyone for 2 days were Su Ruyan's. He paused. The village has decided. We will no longer follow Headman Wang. We will follow your household. I let that sit for a moment. 3 months ago, I woke up in a leaking hut with 3 starving wives, 12 silver in debt, and a reputation as the village's least useful person. Now the same village was handing me its leadership. I didn't do this alone, I said. No, Uncle Tian agreed. That is precisely why the village trusts you. I picked up the box. Heavy for its size. I'll accept the medicine, I said. As for the rest, give me a few days. I can barely stand right now. We'll figure out what comes next when I'm not leaking. Uncle Tian almost smiled. Almost. That afternoon, Qiao Yue came into the courtyard carrying something. She'd been outside, clearing debris from the wall breach. Her bow was cracked, her quiver empty, and she had a cut across her forearm that she hadn't bothered to bandage. She looked like she'd lost a fight with a mountain and was annoyed about it. She dropped a small object on the bench beside me. Found this on Scar's body, she said. I picked it up. It was a seal, a metal stamp, heavy and well-made, the kind used by merchants or officials to mark documents. The design was a serpent coiled around a vertical blade, etched in silver. This was not bandit equipment. Bandits didn't commission silver seals with artistic serpents. Bandits stole things and hit people. I turned it over in my hand. The metal was cold, smooth, and expensive. Scar was carrying this? I asked. In his belt pouch, hidden under a false lining. I stared at it. The system flickered, that familiar blue interface only I could see, hovering at the edge of my vision.
Analyzing.
The words formed slowly, like the system itself was being careful.
Item identified, Silver Serpent Merchant Guild, Authorization Seal. Rank, Regional Faction Tier. Threat Assessment, High. Warning, this organization operates across 3 provinces. Possession of this seal indicates direct affiliation, not casual contact.
A regional faction. 3 provinces. Not a village problem. Not even a county problem. I looked at the serpent on the seal. It stared back, coiled and ready to strike. So Scar hadn't just been a bandit leader with a big sword and poor impulse control. He'd been connected to something much larger. Something with silver seals and regional reach and, presumably, a very strong opinion about who killed their operative. Lin Chen. Qiao Yue was watching me. What is it? I set the seal down carefully, like it might bite. Bad news, I said. The expensive kind. Qiao Yue crossed her arms. How expensive? The kind we can't afford. Su Ruyan took the seal from the table and turned it over in her fingers. Her face didn't change. That was how I knew it was bad. Su Ruyan's expression only went blank when her brain was doing arithmetic she didn't want to show. Silver Serpent Merchant Guild, she said quietly. They operate across 3 provinces. Trade routes, warehouses, enforcement squads. If Scar was theirs, he wasn't freelance. So the bandit raid wasn't just bandits, Mei Lan said from the doorway. She was holding a cup of medicine that I was not looking forward to. No, I said. It wasn't. The room went quiet. Outside, I could hear the village, hammers, voices, someone dragging lumber. The village was rebuilding. They thought the danger had passed. They were wrong. But I wasn't going to say that out loud yet. One crisis at a time. I leaned back against the wall. My ribs screamed at me for it. I ignored them. I'd been ignoring them for 3 days. We were becoming close friends, the pain and I. The kind of friends who hate each other. The guild won't know yet, Su Ruyan said, setting the seal down. Not specifically. Scar was supposed to raid the village, take what he could, and report back. When he doesn't report, they'll send someone to check. How long? Qiao Yue asked. Depends on how often he was expected to report. Could be a week. Could be a month. So we have time, Mei Lan said. Su Ruyan looked at her. We have a window. That's not the same thing. She was right. And she was right in exactly the way that made me want to go back to bed and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't do that, because the seal was sitting on the table, and the serpent was staring at the ceiling, and somewhere out there, someone was going to come looking for answers. The immediate crisis was over. Scar was dead. The bandits were scattered. The village was intact, mostly. The compound was damaged, but standing. My wives were alive. I was alive, which was honestly a surprise given the amount of blood I'd lost in that courtyard. But the next crisis was already forming. And this one wouldn't be solved with pitfalls and pepper powder. I picked up the seal one more time. The serpent insignia was detailed, scales, fangs, the whole production. This wasn't something stamped out in a back alley. Someone important had commissioned this. Someone important had given it to Scar. And someone important was going to notice it was missing. Qiao Yue, I said. Double the hunting patrols. I want eyes on every approach to the village. If a stranger shows up, I want to know before they reach the palisade. She nodded and left. Mei Lan, keep growing. We need surplus food and medicine. If we have to fortify again, we need supplies. She set the medicine cup on the table, pointedly, and left. Su Ruyan. She raised an eyebrow. Find out everything you can about the Silver Serpent Merchant Guild. Trade routes, contacts, anything. Use the market town. Use Merchant Zhao if you have to. I already started, she said. Of course she had. She left the room. I sat alone with the seal and my broken ribs and the quiet certainty that nothing was going to be simple again. I looked at the serpent one last time. Then I tucked it into my belt pouch and stood up. Time to go back to work. Meanwhile, somewhere far from Azure Mountain Village, in a study that cost more than every house in the village combined, a man sat behind an ornate wooden desk. His face was hidden in shadow. Candles flickered in iron holders along the walls. Scrolls and ledgers were stacked with the precision of someone who treated information as currency. His right hand rested on the armrest. A silver ring gleamed on his index finger, carved with a serpent insignia, coiled, fanged, identical to the one on the seal, now sitting in a peasant's belt pouch 3 provinces away. A figure knelt on the polished floor. Head down. Silent. Say that again, the man behind the desk said. His voice was calm. Quiet. The kind of quiet that made people forget to breathe. Azure Mountain Village survived, my lord. The raiding party was destroyed. Scar is dead. Silence. The silver ring tapped once against the armrest. Scar failed, the man said. That happens. Scar failed and left evidence behind. That does not happen. My lord, find out who helped them. The tap came again. Slow. Deliberate. Find out who they are. Find out what they have. And find out what they know. The kneeling figure pressed his forehead to the floor. Yes, my lord. And bring me the seal. The figure left. The door closed without a sound. The man in the shadows remained still. The candlelight caught the silver serpent on his ring. It glinted once, bright and cold, like a warning no one in Azure Mountain Village could hear.